Well, awesome, Dan. Thanks for joining me on the podcast, All Things Benzo. As I was just telling you, I don't know too much about you. I started to do some research, and then I thought it would just be better to kind of have this be more organic and just get to know you instead of having 50 notes and jumping around. So, hope you don't mind. So, um,
Right.
I guess we could begin by just giving me a little bit of your story and some background and reference. I know you're a benzo coach, right? And I was watching some of your videos, and you and I talked a little bit about fishing and things. So we had some
Mhm.
similarities. I'm sure we'll dive in a minute.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, man. I'm really, really excited to talk to you. I was just thinking before I jumped on this call with you that when I came off of benzos in 2015, I think you were, God, one of the only people around, at least that I found. And I remember watching your videos. So now to be on the other side of it here talking to you, it's
Yeah,
awesome and gives me a lot of gratitude. So yeah, thanks a lot. I really appreciate it.
yeah, well, that's great. So you
Yeah,
go all the way back there.
yeah.
It's cool
Yeah.
though, right? Because I tell the people I work with all the time, you never know how close you are to recovery, number one, because it
Hmm.
can get really dark and you just feel like you're hopeless. And I said, look, I've felt that way countless times. And now to be here, like you, I'm sure people have written me and said, you literally saved my life. And it's like, wow,
Right.
and so you just never know the impact of what you're going to, and so now here you are on the other side doing the same work, probably saving people's lives as well. And yeah, it's a great full circle.
It is. It is. Yeah. It's an honor to be able to do it. I mean, I was a guy who started making videos on my cell phone, and started putting videos up on YouTube.
Right.
One thing led to another, and then I had people reaching out, asking me if I would be a coach, if I'd be willing to talk to them. So the way that kind of just worked out organically, worked itself out, is it's pretty amazing. So to be here, on this side of it, and to be able to reach back and help pull other people out of those dark areas, like you said,
Right.
it's amazing to be able to do, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And your story sounds organic like mine, where you kind of come back and share a couple of videos of inspiration maybe, and then people started wanting more, and then and eventually what I did was, because I was working as an artist and I didn't think I was going to go into this work, never for a minute, and nor did I want to. I was
Mhm.
almost like the reluctant hero or something like that.
Same.
um
Yeah. Hmm.
I just wanted to put out the good message and tell people they'll get better, and then sort of go back to being an artist indiscreetly. And then that blew up, and people kept asking for more videos. And eventually, I mean, initially I wasn't even putting my face in the video because I was so worried about what my peers would think, and would they understand it, or would they think I was an addict, or how would that hurt my business? And
Right.
finally, I just sort of embraced it. I was like, I'm just going to put out a series of videos because people need to hear it. And then I thought, you know what? I'm going to put out a book. I'll say it all, and then I'll walk away. And then people were like, "Oh, we love the book. Do you do coaching?" No, I don't do good. So sort of like you, it just sort of kept dragging me into this thing where suddenly it's like, I guess I'm a benzo coach now. Strange.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Right. That's very similar to me. Yeah. I was very reluctant, like you, to even put my story out there.
Right.
And I guess I just got to a point where I said, like, if somebody's going to hold it against me, or if somebody's going to try to, ding me for, my past or my story, then whatever. I'm got this one life to live, and I'm just going to put it out there and kind
Yeah.
of throw caution to the wind a little bit.
Right.
And like you, very reluctant. I did not want to be like known as like the benzo guy on social media. I actually started out doing videos about a whole lot of like other stuff, but when I started doing this, it got a little bit of traction, took off. Sounds like just like you, and
Right.
maybe it's meant to be. I don't know.
I like to think so. So give
Yeah.
me a little bit of background on your benzo ride. Like, what did you go through? How long? What dosages? And what was that like?
Yeah. So, well, I started off on psych meds when I was 17. With Zoloft was my first psych med.
Mhm.
Um, and always had depression growing up, always had, a lot of anxiety. So I was already depressed and anxious. They told me the SSRI was going to help with that. Take
Right.
this, you'll be okay. It actually made me pretty manic. And didn't really do much for my anxiety. Actually made me kind of aggressive in a lot of ways, which is not like me at all. I'm pretty laid back, always been like a musician, laid back, kind of like I always call myself like I'm about 1/8 hippie. I'm
Yeah.
not very like in your face type of dude, but that drug definitely changed me. So on from there, early 20s, got introduced to benzodiazepines, and not through a doctor, it was through somebody I was working with.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Addiction's part of my story. So I was getting them from this guy that I worked with at a restaurant. But when I tried them, I realized how effective they were at alleviating my anxiety. So
Right.
from there, I went to my GP and told him, hey, I'm having a lot of anxiety. Is there anything that you can recommend for me? And, hint, hint, nudge, nudge. I've heard about this drug called Xanax. I heard it's really effective. And then I got my first prescription for it. So that was probably 2003, 2004. And about 2008 or 2009, I started hitting tolerance withdrawal. Kind of knew what was happening, wasn't 100% sure, but I figured it was probably due to the benzos.
Right.
I was still taking a low dose. I think I was still taking 0.5 once or twice a day. Once I hit tolerance withdrawal, I started just descending fast mentally. Like I was in college at the time. I was taking a full load of courses at USF, which you're probably familiar with being
Yeah.
from Florida.
Yeah. Right there, my place.
Mm-hmm. I went to the psychiatrist at USF, and I told her what was going on, and she said, well, you just need to up your dose. That's it, simple as that. And I said, well, isn't there going to be a problem down the road with that? Aren't I going to get into tolerance withdrawal again, because I've been on this for years. Hit tolerance withdrawal, isn't that going to happen down the road? She said, don't worry about it. No, it's not going to happen. You're fine. You just need Xanax extended release is what she told me, so it'll be longer acting. I said, okay, well, what am I going to do? Okay, I'll take it. From there, it worked for a while. I mean, I went from Xanax XR, I think, to Ativan, and then eventually to Klonopin.
Mm-hmm.
Make a long story short, I ended up on 2 or 3 milligrams of Klonopin on a mood stabilizer because I was diagnosed with bipolar. I started taking Suboxone, which is prescribed for opiate addiction.
Right.
I was still taking SSRI, but they switched me from Zoloft to Prestique, which is an SNRI.
Oh boy.
Yeah. And then they added Vyvanse to the mix, just to keep things with a little razzle dazzle. So by this time, I'm on this potent cocktail, and mentally, I just started, coming unraveled. I just started coming apart at the seams with this cocktail of drugs I had in me. And I went from 2 milligrams of Klonopin straight to 5 milligrams per day at this point. So now I'm on a huge dose of Klonopin. I'm on all these other drugs, and I wasn't able to hold it together. I was just, I was looking around like, hey, I'm on all these psychiatric medications. These things are supposed to be helping me. Why aren't I getting better? I remember that point where I said to myself, like, I'm taking all this stuff and they're telling me this is what's going to help you get better. This is what's going to fix what's wrong with you. And I'm on, all these medications, and I'm getting worse. And I remember thinking, what's going on? I thought I was doing the right thing. From there, my family said, why don't you go get some help in treatment? Why don't you go to a detox and just, get all the meds out of your system, find out what your baseline is, and then, move on from there. And at the time I thought, I didn't know what to do. I was just like, okay, I knew enough that I shouldn't abruptly stop benzodiazepines. I wasn't so ignorant that I knew that, I could have a seizure or something really bad could happen. So I knew enough to ask the treatment center, are you going to help me not go into seizure and die coming off of 5 milligrams of Klonopin daily? And they just assured me, yeah, you'll be fine. You'll be good. We're going to keep you comfortable is what they told me. And I just bought it. I was like, okay, yeah, fine. So I went down to South Florida at this treatment center. They checked me in and they tapered me off of everything in 9 days.
Wow.
Yeah. After being on benzos for 13 years and all these other psych drugs. So I went through a horrendous time, psychosis, 2 trips to the psych ward. Um, the experience was unreal. I mean, I don't know how much you want to go into depth about that experience, but
Well,
it
I
was
don't want you to, dig open any old wounds there with it, so we can
yeah.
gloss over the really gritty part. But I hear you. And you know what really pisses me off? Every story I hear like yours, is just the washing of the hands that the doctors do when they finally go, wow, everything we threw at them isn't working and it's causing problems. Let's just rip them off everything. That seems to be their
Mhm.
thing. Let's just wash our hands of it, and there's no accountability, there's no lawsuit, there's nothing. I mean, I'm thinking about it like in terms of surgery or something. It's like, they do surgery on your hand, your left hand, and then your right hand, then your left foot, and they finally go, just cut off his arms and feet. We
Right.
messed up. Let's just take all his limbs off, start over. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I approached the psychiatrist who ripped me off all the drugs after my couple trips to the psych ward, after I started coming out of the psychosis. And, I said, do you realize what's happened? Like, do you realize what you did? Um, and she just looked at me and she said, you can't keep dragging yourself through the mud like this. You gotta pick your head up. You can't, you've just got a bad attitude. Basically, is what she
Oh,
told me.
right,
It was my fault.
right.
Yeah, they told me I was the sickest person they'd ever seen in that treatment center,
Wow,
ever.
wow.
Yeah.
Can I ask you now? Were you able to just kick the other drugs in that time, or were they kind of getting dragged into the mix a little bit, the alcohol or pain
Mm-hmm.
pills or whatever it was, or did you just sort of were you just sort of self-medicating, and then once the Xanax got into the mix, it was easier to kind of pull away from that?
Yeah, I was a heavy drinker for a long time.
Right.
But once I found Xanax, it kind of took the place of the alcohol for me and did what I
Yeah.
needed alcohol to do, which was lessen
Right.
the anxiety that I had just, going through life on a daily basis. So I figured, in my mind at the time when I was in my early 20s, if I could take a pill that's going to substitute for my heavy drinking, and I don't have the hangovers in the morning, I'm not sick every day, I'm not killing my liver, then it seemed like a viable option to me. It seemed like the right thing to do. So that's what
Right.
I did. But the thing is, with my opiate addiction, that was just kind of left unchecked the entire time through my medication journey. And
So
that
you were
really didn't.
you were feeding on that a little bit here and there.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. The entire way, basically. Yeah, to various to various lengths. I was, and it really didn't stop until I started taking the Suboxone. But then, I mean, it really that wasn't the long term option for me. Staying
Right.
on that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Do you mind if I ask, are you still on Suboxone, or were you able to get off all of that? And are you now drug free, so to speak?
I'm completely 100% drug free. The only thing I take is fish oil. I take SAMe supplement and some vitamin D. That's it.
That's
When I
so
came
good.
off of Yeah, when I came off of everything, the only thing that I was left on was gabapentin for a few years, and I ended up tapering off of that and propranolol. So those were the last 2 drugs that I was on. Tapered off those in
Yeah.
2020, I think. And so for the last
2020.
couple of years, yeah, I
Oh, so
stayed
you're
on
still
the.
fresh. So you're still kind of healing, maybe even, right? So you're kind of a few years out now.
Yeah, I came off of all the Clonopin and all the other stuff like that big cocktail that I was on. That
Yeah.
was in 2015.
15.
But then I stayed on the
I
gabapentin for
see.
about 3 years, and then took like about 18 months to taper off of that. So yeah, completely off of everything in about 2020. So when people ask me how healed am I, or am I completely healed, because in
Yeah.
videos that I make, I do say I'm healed, but then I
Yeah.
talk about having benzo belly. And so some people are
Right.
like, well, how can you say you're healed if you still have benzo belly? And what I like to say is that I put myself at around 85% healed,
Yeah.
meaning I can do anything that I want to in my life. I'm not held back anymore by the benzo injury, and I get to do the things that I wanted to do when I was still injured. But I do still have symptoms. I do still have benzo belly. They told me
Right.
that was going to be the last thing for me to leave, and so far they're completely right. So I do have that, but I feel like I've come such a long way from where I used to be. I do consider myself healed.
Great, man. And now, you know, 98% of us that get on, I'd really put it higher, even higher than that get on drugs. And I had my issues with it too in my early 20s. Uh for a good ride in my 20s actually. And it was a lot of self-medicating. But my excuse me, my I came from a very abusive childhood. Like, and it's almost until I start rattling everything out that I go, damn, it's a lot. That was a lot of like a bodybuilder, powerlifting, abusive, violent, like very violent father, growing up in domestic violence. And then that was just a trend that just kept going until I was about 18, moving from one ghetto to another, alcohol, drugs, cops, domestic violence, running home from school so you don't get jumped and beat every day. Like when I was, I think 15, I was a victim of a hate crime, kind of a terrorist crime. Really, it was really almost an act of terrorism by a guy from the Middle East that openly said he didn't like Americans and tried to kill me and two of my friends with his car and almost succeeded on me.
Wow. Wow.
Put me in the hospital, broke seven of my ribs, punctured my lung in three places, compound fractured my lower spine in three places, tore my spleen in half. I mean, it was awful. So all my childhood was filled with trauma, violence,
Yeah. Yeah.
running, and so I just look at it like my limbic system was already jacked when I came into the world, coming into a family that had anxiety and depression, and a lot of anxiety and depression and things like that are predictable in the womb, depending on how your mother's. That's why I think it is so damn important for any mother that's pregnant, or soon to be mother, to be very calm and nurtured and relaxed and have a very good pregnancy as much as possible, because it's like a little stew. It's like a little oven going on in there, and all that estrogen and cortisol and adrenaline pumping through her blood into the baby. It can lead to more things. So that's highly correlated. So I already came into the world with that, then tumultuous childhood, and it was just one thing after the other. So by the time I hit, 16, 17, growing up a poor kid, really, really skinny, I had a chipped tooth, hand me down clothes, bullied, all of that, just not good self esteem. And then you discover like alcohol, and it's like, oh, well, I could just take a little sip of this and it sort of washes it away a little bit.
Hmm.
And so I started self medicating, and then you get into the friends that do that, and then other things get put into the mix, and suddenly you're like this young 20-something-year-old guy. You don't know what the hell's happening, and you're just sort of chasing this path of self-medicating. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? You were really just sort of it's not even about trying to get high or something. It's just like, I just don't want to wake up with the anxiety, the fear, or I want to be able to sleep, and all those type of things. Like, so I guess in the long-winded question was like, did you have something like that put you on the path of drugs in your early life, or was it just kind of depression? Or
Yeah, no, you spoke to that really, really well. In insofar as kind of the backstory that I kind of have too, um, with trauma and a lot of things in my past that were unhealed, and trauma that I didn't even know was there. I couldn't
yeah,
identify it. All
yeah,
I knew was that I felt off. I felt different. I felt somehow I was angry. I had a
mm-hmm,
lot of rage, and I didn't even know what that rage was directed at. It was hidden trauma that I couldn't pinpoint.
yeah, yeah,
I couldn't see it.
yeah,
And so, yeah, similar to you, as soon as I was introduced to alcohol, drugs, pills, it eased that. It felt like I could take a deep breath for the first time in my life, and I could
right,
actually inhale fully. And so, yeah, also, just like you said, it wasn't so much that I wanted to get high or party. At first I did, because I was
right,
young and I was, playing in bands and, playing music and traveling all over the country. So that was kind of part of it. But after a pretty short time of doing that, a year or two, I wanted to put everything down. and just go back to school and, go back and get my bachelor's degree and live a normal life.
Right.
But um, I think it's because those all those traumas and things were inside of me too, that I still couldn't recognize. Um, I was medicating those. I wasn't doing the hard partying. I wasn't going out at night anymore and
Right.
showing up at 4 a.m. I was just trying to live a normal life, to study, to do a good job,
Right.
to get a career. I just wanted to do those things, but I still have this like garbage inside of me, this blackness that I didn't know how to reckon with, and I didn't know how to
Yeah.
get that stuff out. And interestingly, like you were saying about some of these genetic markers are maybe predictable inside the womb. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, but there was a study done on mice where they had them. I think they had them smell like some certain scent, and each time that they would smell the certain scent, they get a little tiny shock, and
Hmm.
they kept doing it repeatedly over and over. And then they would take the little electrodes off the poor little mice, but every time the mice would smell whatever it was, the lilac or something, whatever they had in their cage, they would jump, like they would
Yeah.
get a shock from their brain. And then interestingly, their children had the same reaction to that same scent.
Right.
And then the next generation also had the same
Yep.
reaction, to show how genetically these traumas can be passed on through
Absolutely.
through
Yep.
one generation to the next, which is really interesting to think about. And I think for me there was a lot of that
Yep.
potentially going on too.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm familiar with that. And that's generational trauma, and so to speak. We saw similar things with Jews that survived the Holocaust and their children and their grandchildren, and this thing is passed down. Yeah, it's very interesting. You know what we know of the brain and DNA. I mean, this was something Carl Jung was talking about 100 years ago, literally, that in our DNA, where we program these experiences as sort of like lessons to be carried out or taught to the next generation. And people thought he was crazy. And now you're
Mm-hmm.
starting to see this, like, oh wow, this can actually, yeah, it's not just, well, your parents were anxious or something. And the other part of that, of what you're describing, like how it all started, is textbook classical conditioning. It's textbook how anxiety, depression, and all of this stuff, for us, gets going. And I think that's really important to understand how that works. Take benzos. You have a symptom. It could be anything, and I tell people it could be anything: water, the color red, a cloud, eating spinach, and eventually it gets so muddy that you don't know what's what anymore, because it can just, if I'm sitting here having anxiety, and every time I'm smelling, like you're kind of using the example of the smell, vanilla, your brain starts to connect those two things, and then next thing you know, you smell vanilla and you're starting to get panic. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a better example would be, I always say, you have cortex based anxiety and you have amygdala based anxiety, and cortex being intellectual. And I describe it like, if you stay up all night watching a documentary on bridges collapsing, and then the next day you're going to work and you got to go over a bridge you've always gone over, never had anxiety. Well, suddenly that next morning you're anxious, or you might even have a panic attack, and you go, wow, oh, well, obviously it's from that bridge documentary I watched. Okay, easy. The amygdala is unconscious. It's classical conditioning. It just connects two things. So in that example would be like never watching that documentary, going over that bridge that morning, no anxiety, no problem, sitting in traffic, getting stuck in traffic. Suddenly you get a phone call. Someone you love is in the hospital. They're telling you, Dan, you got to get here quick. This is so serious. You start to panic. Your phone goes dead. You can't get off the bridge. You sit there for an hour fighting anxiety. You finally get off the bridge. You turn around. You start to come back over the bridge to go back the other way where the hospital is. You get stuck in traffic for another hour. There's no way to call anyone. I mean, you're just losing it on this bridge. Finally, you get to the hospital. Everything's fine. Great. Next day, next week, you're going over the bridge. Suddenly, panic attack. What is this? And that's how quick it can happen, because the amygdala just says something bad happened right here, and we need to remember this. And so, in order to help you survive, I'm going to remind you by, hitting you full of a chemical message of fear. And so that process permeates everything in benzos. I mean, everything in benzos. It's the, if you look at like what GABA is, what does it do? It's a governor of the limbic system, of that fight or flight system, largely, right? It helps keep things, the parasympathetic, down. Um, so once you take that out of the mix, it's like you have this system that can no longer almost govern itself, and it's wildly suggestive and it's wildly reactive, and anything in fear is going to be programmed in that amygdala really damn quick. It's like going down to the watering hole to fish and you encounter a bear. You're going to remember that. You will never go near that watering spot again. You will always remember that, right? For a good damn reason, which is great if it's a bear, and terrible if you're sitting on the couch smelling lilacs or whatever the other stimulus is, right? So I think I just take that moment. I don't mean to preach to you. You probably already know this, but for our audience maybe listening, I think that's really, really important. And in my work, that's a lot of what I do, is sort of, once you understand what it is, we can sort of reverse engineer it to a point. Granted, with benzos, it's always being fueled by withdrawal. So it's always an uphill battle, which would be a good question to ask you. Now, I don't know how much you know about me, but I think I've inevitably become a controversial, somewhat figure in the benzo community, because the ideologies are very different in this community. There's those that say therapy doesn't work and you can't take an antidepressant if you're coming off of it, and you can't. I mean, you can't. I mean, I think I call it the lay and pray model: avoid everything, lay and pray. And essentially creating these fear mongering groups where all we do is feed our rumination off each other. I call it like benzo bars. We sit down and go, oh, Dan, have you heard of akathisia? And you go, what? And I pour you a shot. And have you heard of histamines? And you pour me a shot. And did you hear about John Doe? And and we just keep doing this back and forth. And our limbic system, I mean, what message is it sending the limbic system? It's just increasing danger. And so it keeps escalating until finally it just goes into a full-blown crisis mode. And next thing you know, you're bedbound, paralyzed. Not to say that can't happen just from benzo withdrawal, but I guess my question is, what are your thoughts on how effective something like therapy or exposure therapy in the right setting? How much can we push back in your experience so far?
Wow, no, you said a lot of good stuff right there. The first thing that came to my mind when you said exposure therapy was me going to Disney World right away as soon as I came off of everything. And that was my intention. My intention was to expose myself to as much stimuli as possible, because I thought maybe it would give me the best chance to recover as quickly as possible. I didn't know. I mean, there was just so little information, and there's not that much information that's really studied,
Right.
So I don't recommend that for everybody, but that's something that I did because it was overstimulating. It was, but man, there's so many different ways I could go with that question. What I try to say, and when I talk to people, and in hindsight for what I did, I think I would have gone slower. And while I think exposure therapy it's important, I think it plays a critical role in recovering from benzodiazepines, lest we go the opposite direction and become fear-based, bedbound, draw the curtains, staying in a dark room, doom scrolling. You don't want to go to that extreme, but you don't need to go to the extreme of running off to Disney World at the same time either. So, and because we're all so different and we are so varied in this process, we took benzos for different lengths of time. Our bodies react differently. We have, various, physiologies. So what I try to say is, what can you do, and what can you do to push yourself when the time is right, at least a little bit out of your comfort zone, whether that's going to the grocery store, or even just walking down to the corner and back, or out to get your mail. That's enough for some people to
that's
to
how
overstimulate them.
Walk into the mailbox. That was it. So it sounds like we're kind of on the same page with that, and I echo that too. In fact, I think my detractors or people that haven't spent enough time listening to me, they'll just go a lot of just word of mouth stuff. Oh, Coach Powers just thinks everybody should go out and do exposure, and I'm like, That's not true at all. I have a very, very clear program set out. In the first months of my program, we don't do any exposure. I mean, I don't even, and when we do it, we start with kind of a classical conditioning type of a situation. Well, I call it the five senses limbic retraining, where I say, you can use CBT and talk to your brain and say, hey, everything's going to be okay. We're safe and everything. And that can be very helpful. But the problem is, if you do it too much, and if you're very anxious when you're doing it, the wires can get crossed again, like the lilac example that you kind of used earlier, right? So now self-soothing becomes a trigger. And then people start to really panic. Oh my God, this isn't working. It's making me more anxious. The deep breathing's making me anxious. The talk therapy, all this stuff, And so I say, well, listen, you have this amygdala thing too working against you. Remember, you have two types of anxiety at least happening there. You're trying to use your intellect to talk yourself out of a bad situation, which can work for certain things, but with the benzos, it's usually too much. And I don't want to dissuade anyone who's getting good results doing CBT and that kind of thing. Keep it up for sure. But if things start to get sort of backfiring on you, then I say go to option B. And again, I call it the five senses limbic retraining for a reason, because what I have us do is, in a nutshell, is access all five of our senses, preferably if you can. I mean, some are more sensitized than others and won't be able to do that, but convey pleasure to your senses. That's in a real simple way of putting it, convey pleasure. So I would have them lay in a bathtub for 2 months, right? I don't even care where you're starting and how good you're starting. Or we'll start in the bathtub and we'll do some deep breathing. We'll implement a kind of a layer of mindfulness in there, disconnecting from thoughts, not identifying with them, but not fighting them either. Slowing our breathing, training our brain to access that parasympathetic. And then I say, focus on your senses. It's just also part of mindfulness training, where I say, put a piece of chocolate in your mouth, light a vanilla candle. You got the taste feeling, that's pleasurable. You got the sight of the candle. You've got the warm water that's pleasurable. You put on some nice music. I always listen to like Enya or something kind of soft and Celtic and pretty. Hit all those senses: smell, taste, touch, sound, everything. And then deep breathe and don't fight it. Just let it wash over you. That is the medicine. And do that for months. I mean, we'll do this for several weeks to even months. This is before we ever do any exercise or walk, exposure, nothing. So I think it's a pretty conservative approach to getting you primed for it. And then at the end of those exercises, what you're doing is you're using a lot of classical conditioning. You're training your brain that when I have this dark chocolate and I smell vanilla and I listen to Enya and I feel that nice water, I'm creating a safe space, so to speak, for my limbic system, one safe space. And then when you get to that place, I say, once you feel like you're finally getting a little momentum or a little bit of an opening there, and it could take weeks, and if you're really bad, it's a real uphill battle. But if you can get to that place for even moments where you can lay in that bathtub or a hot tub or whatever, and you can feel a little bit safer, it's like, yes, this is finally, it's starting to work. We're finally creating, like I say, when you're in benzo withdrawal, it's like being in the wilderness full of grizzly bears, and you can't do anything. Nobody's coming for you. You don't know how to get out. If you go to the water to drink, the bear's there. If you try to eat, the bear finds you. If you try to hide in a cave, your back's against a wall, he'll come in and get you. You can't climb a tree. You can't outrun it. You can't fight it. It's like, what the hell do you do in this situation? Now, what does this convey to the limbic system? It's like crisis, crisis, crisis. And eventually the limbic system will just keep escalating, and to the point where you actually start to have DPDR. You'll start to like disassociate and freeze up and think about all the 5 F's of trauma. Like you'll eventually just fawn. You'll fall. You'll become seized up, essentially, almost catatonic. This is a survival thing. And that's where I think a lot of people slip into. And that's, so anyway, doing the 5 senses is sort of trying to reverse engineer that and show the limbic system, okay, hey, we're in the woods. There's a bear and all these things are true, but we have this little tiny log cabin we're building. It's just a little wall between us and the bear. And we're gonna spend weeks or months building on that little cabin, that little safe space in the woods. The double effectiveness of this is that at the end of that, when you start to introduce stimuli that's fearful, and it could be anything, it could be food or the idea of learning how to drive again. Let's use that one for example. So now, okay, we'll use driving. So then we'll sit there. and we'll breathe and we'll get into this place. We'll get comfortable and safe again. And then we'll just think about driving for a little bit. That's it. We don't need to get in the car. We don't have to do anything. Just introduce it in your mind a little bit. And you're sort of using all that goodness to sort of overpower the fear of driving. And eventually your brain will desensitize to that. So this is what I mean by exposure therapy. It doesn't just mean go to Disney World. It means just introducing something that would have been otherwise fearful and then kind of covering it with all the goodness. And the brain will just sort of, it will just desensitize to it. And then we'll go further and further. And then eventually what happens is when we actually get to the part of driving, I tell people, again, graded exposure and everything, right? So you go out to the car. Let's just spend 15 minutes with the car running. We're not even going to drive anywhere. We're just going to sit there because that's enough for a lot of us to be really anxious. Just sitting in that car driving, it's like, oh my God, you know. But then we can bring a little bit of that vanilla, right? Like a lotion or something, touch our nose, smell it, and a little piece of dark chocolate. You put on Enya in the car. And what is this doing? It's pulling back on those classical conditioning kind of pathways that we've been creating of safety. And so it starts to introduce safety back into the situation. So that's what I mean when I say graded exposure therapy. You know, take techniques that would help us feel safe at first, and then gradually introduce that fearful stimulus, let us desensitize, and then gradually walk it back further and further. So that's what I'm talking about. And again, I'm talking to you, but I'm also kind of explaining it to the audience. So I don't mean to be redundant or anything to you. But what are your thoughts on that? Does that sound pretty rational?
No, that's beautiful. Yeah, I think that's perfect. I really I love that. I love that everything that you just laid out. I think that would be so helpful for people. And you know, it's much more nuanced and intentional than running off to Disney World or you know, I'm just gonna you know, or even running out to the mailbox, like we said, for a lot of people, or whatever it is. It's multifaceted and it's a very intentional practice that you introduce very gently to coach people to that point. And I think it's very helpful. I love it.
Yeah. And so that's my I also share that because of some of the things you were saying. Like, I think that's my some people have a misconception that I'm telling them to go to Disney World, and I'm like, no. Now I admire that. I admire the spirit. It's a warrior spirit. It's courageous. It's strength. It's determination. It's fighting back. It's a lot of good things. But could it have overwhelmed you and put you backwards? Yeah, it could have. It's like it could have activated what I consider a lot of us are left with coming off benzos is sort of like complex PTSD. And there's a ton of triggers. And there's a ton of triggers again, because just as we can associate safety with water, we can associate danger with water. And just as we can associate safety with, you know, like you use with the lilacs and the rats, like that's how it works, you know? And so I just think it's a breeding ground for other kind of neuroses and a breeding ground for these sort of trauma pathways. So I've heard some people criticize the idea of rewiring the brain, and I put a blog out on this, and I said, you don't really rewire anything because we don't have wires in our brain. But this is what we're talking about. We're talking about creating firing sequences or pathways in the brain, and they're happening anyway. They're happening. People listening to this right now, it's happening to them. You know, everybody lays in bed, and I say, you know, it's not your safe space. It's where you go to suffer. You please understand that if all you're doing is laying in bed and suffering, it's like going to the watering hole and always encounter a bear. Well, I like the watering hole, but your part of your brain is associating it with danger. So now you're not sleeping. And now every time you get into bed, you're activating. I have so many clients that when they get away from the house, even when they're really agoraphobic, which in the math of it all, you would think, God, if they're going to leave the house for an hour to go on a trip, they're going to come back completely overwhelmed. And they may come back with a little more anxiety, but they almost always report, oh, I had a little bit of a break or a window, or I had a little bit of a better. And then, you know, they'll say, Coach, how come when I came home is when things got hard? Because home is where the grizzly bears were. That's where you've been suffering. You know what I mean? So it's a mixed bag of things there, right?
I agree 100%. And everything that I try to do is right along those lines of what you just described, and our neuroplasticity. Like you said, it's not rewiring, but we do have neural pathways that are always going. And so I'm always thinking, how am I? And I was thinking about it when I was going through it too. How is my brain being affected by this?
Right.
What am I telling myself? What is my environment telling me? And
Right.
just like you said, that was a beautiful example of getting out of the house, even if you're agoraphobic, because the association that you have with this bed is where I'm always anxious, or this house is where I'm always anxious. And
Yep.
that little bit of, external stimuli being changed can have a dramatic effect. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. I actually started again graded exposure. I started just sort of in the backyard. I've had a lot of clients. I have a lot of success with this, and this is why I get frustrated with some of the other coaches and information out there saying exposure doesn't work. I'm like, it absolutely works, and nobody's provided any argument why it wouldn't work. I mean, I can only guess what their answer would be because I haven't heard it other than them just saying it doesn't work. Like, why wouldn't it work? Well, because Benzo's cause chemical. I'm not arguing it's not an uphill battle. Absolutely will be an uphill battle, but so is any other trauma or anxiety disorder for that matter. Granted, it's still chemical. Um, and sometimes I think some of us, all we can do to set realistic expectations and all this stuff we're talking about, because I don't want anybody listening to this and thinking, oh, I can do that. And what if I don't? Did I fail? No. Sometimes it's just going to be an uphill battle, but sometimes all you can do is sort of help things not escalate to a worse place,
Mm-hmm.
during the taper, especially. Now post, you'll see a lot more progress in this kind of stuff. But I wasn't necessarily fully thriving, coming off of benzos, doing exposure. In fact, I dropped 20 milligrams overnight. I was on 40, 50 milligrams of Valium for 10 years, dropped 20, reached
Oof.
a hell of a place, and spent several months in bed doing all the things that I still see, and all the information, not all, but, a lot of pervasive information, lay, pray, eat vegan, eat a lot of stuff on diet, or whether it's this or that, because now it's not just vegan, now it's keto and the carnivore diet, and I see all these arguments online about what diet is the right thing. But basically, the idea of just sort of laying and praying and waiting the storm out. And when I did that, things got infinitely worse over time. I mean, I became suicidal. I developed akathisia. And this is the other thing about akathisia. Not to trigger anyone, but this is positive. There's two types of akathisias that I've experienced with this, with many, many clients now. There is the initial punch that you get that's way more chemical from dropping something like 20 milligrams or coming off an antidepressant or something like that. It's very real inner restlessness, and you got to keep moving, and it'll drive you crazy. The other thing is it becomes secondary akathisia, is what I call it, which is a kind of hyperarousal, almost trauma response in the brain. It's a learning, again, of those wires crossing, and the fear of that inner adrenaline going starts to grow and grow and grow, and it becomes almost psychogenic. It becomes, the brain just starts dumping all of this, and you become so hypervigilant and so self-aware and so freaked out over having akathisia, that it just totally escalates the whole damn thing. And for those people, learning how to do like the five senses and all that stuff, and breathing and disconnecting and learning not to fear it, but just acknowledge it and make peace and acceptance, it starts to go away. Right. Whereas the initial akathisia, that's a hell of a lot harder thing to treat, because that's very much receptor chemical. It's a different kind of ball game going on there, which I still would argue doing the right practices is going to give you the best results in that case, in that situation. But there's definitely a kind of two different things there. Sorry if I'm jumping around a little bit. I try to use these podcasts to get out lots of information as well. So
Yeah, and again, you spoke to that really, really well. And I think on a very simple level, it might just be talking about distraction, as people talk about in the groups a whole lot.
right.
Taking my mind off of what's going on with me, hyper
Yeah.
arousal, hyper focused on this, and just putting my attention somewhere else, as
Yeah.
if I can possibly, even even if it's something silly or something stupid, or I'm watching a dumb movie,
Yeah.
or whatever it is. Yeah, I think that's, the distraction definitely helps. For me too, I could not stay in my bed, or first of all, I had that first akathisia you talked about, where I had the inner restlessness. I had to keep going. I couldn't sit down. I mean,
Right.
I was so sick. I feel like, I used to say, if I sit down, I'm sunk,
Mm.
because as soon as I sat down, I would feel all the symptoms. I would feel everything. And then my mind would start going, and my
Right.
mind would just get taken away, off to a dark place. So I had to keep moving, and it was
Yeah.
imperative for me. And that's why I walked around the neighborhood all the time. I had my two little dogs. I would put my hoodie up and I would walk, and pretty
Yeah.
much it was me pacing,
Right.
but I felt a little bit better if I had like this forward momentum. I drove a lot too. I talk about that all the time. Once I was okay to drive, I would just get in my car, and as long as I felt like I had that forward momentum, like it was somehow telling my body that I was safe, that I was
Mm.
okay, and that I was progressing and getting better. And that's
Right.
what I would keep telling myself.
Yeah.
You're getting better. You're getting better as that forward momentum is happening.
That's important, right? Because you got to keep
Mhm.
conveying um safety to your limbic system, as I argue. And I think hope is so important. So I've kind of laid out in a nutshell 5 steps to my recovery program. Not that it's like that simple of like, there's a 5 step that makes it sound way too simple. These are huge, all encompassing processes in each step. But step one would be psychoeducation plus hope restoration. Right? I link those two things and they kind of have a mutual relationship. So the more you have a sense of what's happening to you, the more hope you have. And conversely, if the less you know what's happening to you, the more freaked out you are. And I spent a lot of
Mhm.
time going through that, just going, oh my God, what is this? And the doctor gaslighting me and all of that. And then once you start to have, the tapers planned out and okay, I've got a community, I know what's happening, I'm not crazy, this is not all in my head, and then having I've over the last 10 years working in this area, finally have built a full recovery program. And I think that's super helpful because then you have something. And I always ask people, how, why are you going to heal? And if you're just saying, well, I'm going to just wait it out, I'm like, okay, for most people, that will still work. But then you have to risk lots of bad things happening. If you're just waiting it out in bed, the wheels can come off eventually. So, but if you have a path forward, right, like that's what real hope is. Hope has a path forward. um then it's different, because if you don't have a path, it's just wishful thinking. So to have something
Mhm.
and then say, well, why are you going to heal? And you go, well, because I'm working on building some good classical conditioning and kind of neuroplasticity building, and I'm learning to separate fear from anxiety, and I'm learning to meditate, or I go to therapy, or I'm religious, or whatever. There's a host of things that we can do to help us heal. That gives you a sense of hope, even if it's
Mhm.
small at first. Just, it's like being, again, lost in the woods, and you can't find the North Star. And as soon as you do, you
Right.
say, okay, well, if I keep walking in that direction, surely I'll hit a road somewhere and I'll get out of here.
Mhm.
Just having that little thing, I really think it is so important. So as you start to have a path forward, your hope starts to come back, and then you start to
Mhm.
build momentum. And that's what I kind of heard you talking about there, I think, was this sort of, and you start to remind yourself, you have to really work against the fear and say, no, no, but look what I'm doing. But it's too, no, 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 look what I'm doing. But what if, no, 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 no. But it's always this
Mhm.
voice like trying to
Yep.
sabotage you and tell you that it's not going to work and the bear is going to be waiting for you. And what are you doing? Are you crazy? Right.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's like Viktor Frankl, the
Yeah.
Auschwitz survivor, who talks about the people that he saw survive it were not the toughest person. They were not the strongest person. It was the person who had something to live for. They had a purpose. They had that purpose is like you're talking about that path.
That's right.
I'm doing something towards it. I know that
Right.
even if I'm not feeling it right now, even if I'm going through the motions of taking the Epsom bath, I'm putting the vanilla under my nose, I'm sitting in the car,
Sure.
all those things that you mentioned, or whatever it is. It's like I'm at least I know that I'm engaging in these activities. And
Right.
even if I'm not feeling it, my dopamine system has been completely hijacked.
Right.
um, I have hope that I'm on a path that's going to eventually start to lead me to that place that I want to
Right.
get to healing, to where I can start living my life again. That is so crucial. And those are the
Yeah,
people that I see start to get better and start surviving and thriving
that's
in
right.
benzo withdrawal.
That's right. I totally echo that. We launched we launched a benzo recovery school a few months ago. Been wanting to do that for years. been working on this program. I'm like a mad scientist, just sort of trying to refine things. My background's is doctoral in clinical psychology, so all my psychology is like very heavy in my background, and I knew the program could be helpful for a lot of reasons, give you direction on everything. My idea was I wanted to create an insulated environment with everything my client could want. Here's help with taper, here's the diet, here's how the mental illness part of this works, and here's how you do exposure or mindfulness or the five senses limbic retraining, or all this stuff. And I knew that would be helpful. I just knew it, because those are the tools that truly saved my life. And I had been, over the last 10 years, working with clients doing these things and watching people fight back from the most unbelievable places, the most hopeless of places, and watching them go from being bedbound for years in their room to taking their kids to soccer games again. And it's
Awesome.
like, I know this works. I know it in my heart. I've seen the evidence. So I was very confident, and I was driven like a madman, working 12, 14-hour days, trying to build this and get this thing out. And so I was confident it would work. What I didn't anticipate was the collectiveness of the group. So once we got everybody on the same page, there's something magical that happens when everybody has the same aha moment of the things that we're talking about. And this is where I think sometimes we go wrong, because there's too many cooks in the kitchen. There's too many people pulling you from every direction, and then you start to get overwhelmed, and you start to lose hope again, because I don't know, everybody's contradicting everybody. He says exposure works, he or she says it doesn't, and this person said I should eat keto, and this person says I should eat
Right.
carnivore, and your head starts to spin. But once we all got on the same page and said, look, let's keep it simple, here's the things that work, and then we started excluding all negativity. No more trigger talk, no more symptom talk. I mean, we created a subspace in the school for symptoms like support. It's called a support. But I said, strongly encouraged everybody, do not go down the rabbit hole of rumination, because that's what it is, right? Because people will just keep asking, is headaches normal? Headaches are normal. Why are you're not really asking about headaches. You want to go, and then people will go, and then we'll sit here, and it's like, it becomes like a primal scream therapy or something, that we're all engaging in. But once we all got on the same page, we're like, we're not going to do that. Rumination's like a drug. We got to break it. And we're just going to, fill our minds with positivity, winning plans, all this good, good things. It started to trickle down to everybody. And then people started having windows. And I had people in the school, that almost 10 years hadn't had a window, and started having windows. 3 years, 6 years. I mean, multiple year out clients that were really stuck in a place, or people that just hadn't had a window during their whole 2-year taper, suddenly starting to have windows. Right. And so it just trickled down, and it created this like wildfire effect in there, where it was almost unbelievable to me to see how much winning people started having, just because you were surrounding yourself with people winning. And I always say, I always quote, it's an old quote, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. Right. Show me your friends and I'll show you your future. If you're sitting in a group where everybody's just frantic and hopeless and directionless and hitting wave after wave, and nothing is working, and you just get sucked into this black hole of a vortex of it. But once you can kind of reverse engineer that, have a different people winning and thriving, and not always rainbows and sunshine, right? But even then, when you have someone that's struggling, their reaction to the struggling is different now. They're learning to no longer just become a victim and just sort of lay there and go through it. They wake up with anxiety, for example, and they go, you know what, I'm anxious as hell this morning. I feel awful. I want to lay in bed. I want to cry. I want to get on the groups or the forums or WebMD and research my heart or whatever. But I'm going to get out of bed. I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to do some things. And then by noon, a lot of times that kind of breaks for them. And they go, wow, I can turn that around sometimes. Not always, I used to just lay in bed. I got to the point where when I woke up, within 5 seconds, I felt like I knew how my day was going to go. I mean, within 5 seconds, I could go, today's going to suck. Why bother? Why bother? Just you're defeated within 5 seconds to open your eyes. And it was a very big winning moment for me when I realized, Dave, you don't know that. get up, fight back a little bit, push back, be smart,
Hmm.
and see if you can't get some momentum. And yeah, a lot of times I did, and that was a big moment. But without getting off track here, the hope flooded. I mean, it just flooded everybody, and it was, I mean, it was unbelievable. I mean, I was seeing things, especially in clinical psychology, like seeing growth in things that I wouldn't think would have been possible that fast. You know, we had a woman who, you know, spent 3 4 years in bed. I mean, literally in bed, was given up, coming off meds, and fights her way back. You know, gets to a place where even like a few months ago, she had something big coming up in her life, and she still couldn't even really get to the mailbox. She started getting
Wow.
serious. Started now, she had made a ton of progress at that point. She was happy to be where she was. If she never made it to the mailbox again, she could have lived with that, right? But then something came up very important in her life, and she said, I need to be able to do this, and it means everything to me. So we got more serious with the next level of exposure. And this is someone, I think she was only off like 18 months after a crazy ride. And within like 2 months, she blew us away. I mean, she was driving and going to stores and doing these big things and seeing friends. And I mean, she couldn't believe it, like how fast and how much momentum can shift. So, and I say all this just piggybacking off the idea of hope, that you know, we were talking about hope, and that's why I think it all begins with hope. And once hope goes out the window, it's like a house of cards. It just all comes back down. But if you can put
Hmm.
hope back into the equation, man, you can accomplish some amazing things, right? Sorry, I'm long-winded. I
Absolutely.
talk in big, I talk in a lot of words.
Yeah, no, but it's all really good stuff, and I'm so glad to hear about the people that have been able to be helped, and the people who, like you, the example that you just gave of the woman who was bedbound and then made a rapid turnaround in a short period of time. Um, that's what I love to hear. That's why I started doing this. That's why I started sharing my story. I'm sure it's the same reason that you started doing it,
Yeah,
and
right,
seeing what can happen, because we've had our own stories and our own experiences of coming through it, and knowing how much hope that there truly is.
right,
It's not just like whistling in the dark. And
right.
I'm not blowing smoke up people's butts.
Yeah,
It's the fact that you really can get better. You really can. I don't know
absolutely.
on what timeline. It might be different for each individual,
Sure.
but there's absolutely true and real hope of getting to the other side of this, at least to a place where you can function the way that you'd like to be able to function again. I believe that that's there for everybody.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Yeah.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you're right. And to be clear, not everybody's going to have that amazing turnaround she had. You know, I
Right.
didn't. It took me a year, you know, of like,
All
you know, I
right.
walked out to check the mailbox one day, had a massive panic attack, ran back in the house, and I was like, "Welp, I guess I'm not an outside person anymore. Yeah, I can't drive my car. I guess that's a, you know, I was, my world was shrinking and shrinking. And when I started pushing back and walking to the mailbox, I mean, just to not panic at the mailbox took weeks, and just to walk,
Mm-hmm.
you know, to the stop sign a few houses down took weeks, you know,
Mm-hmm.
more. And so it was about a year before I got back to driving my car again, just locally at night. That took a year. So that wasn't my experience, but it did work. You know, it definitely did work. It was certainly an uphill battle until I was off the benzos, and didn't have that chemical withdrawal feeding into everything. I think that's it really does create an uphill battle. So I tell people, look, I can't promise you all this. I'm talking about amazing things because they're inspirational, but in reality, I only tell people I can promise you 15% improvement. I think that's a very conservative, realistic. Now, could you have 85%? Sure. Could things happen? You know, but I would pretty much promise you 15%. And it may not sound like a lot, but I said, man, when you're going through a hellacious taper, 15% might be the difference between success and failure. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
if I
Yeah.
could, if I could, I wanted to say one more thing about hope. Now you might be familiar with this, but if not, I'd like to share it with the audience. Um, are you familiar with the study of the rats that were put in water to see how long they could swim before drowning?
Yeah, I've heard that
I
one.
think it's
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Dr. Richter. I think is his name, Richter. I want to say.
Mm-hmm.
So, for anyone not familiar, or to just give you a refresher, you know, this scientist put rats in a bucket of water. They were athletic rats, you know, whatever that means, I guess he wasn't grabbing the sick ones, they were healthy,
Right.
good rats. And he would put them in there and see how long they could swim before they would drown, right? I, I know before anyone says what that's cruel, but that's science. This is unfortunate, but it is. So 14 minutes on average before these rats would start to get tired and drown. They would swim frantically for 14 minutes and just give up and drown. And so then he took the rats out. He would take a rat out, put it on dry land for a minute, for about 5 or 10 minutes, and then put it back in the water. And his idea was now the rat had a sense of hope because it would think, well, last time I sat here swimming, so he picked me up and got me out of here to safety. So now I'm hopeful that maybe it'll happen again because he's done it once. So we've introduced that possibility that somebody will pick him up if they just hold on. The rats would go back to swimming. Now, the second time being put back in the water, you might already know this. But do you know how long they would swim for on average?
No, I don't remember.
No, take a guess.
Mm.
14 minutes. What do you think would be, as a scientific minded person? Okay, 14 minutes the first time, taken out, put on dry land for 5 or 10 minutes, put back in the bucket of water. How much longer you think they would swim before they would start to drown?
7 minutes, maybe.
Go up, no, way higher,
Really? After being
way
put on
higher.
that,
Yeah,
20 minutes,
way higher. This is going to be
30
fun.
minutes,
Way
30
high.
minutes.
Let's move into the hours.
Okay.
Yeah,
Wow. Okay. 2 hours.
no.
Holy crap. All
Oh,
right.
on average, anywhere from 30 to 60, as high as 90 hours.
Wow.
It sounds unbelievable. Anybody's going to right now, they're going to go to Google search this. It's absolutely true.
Yeah.
Unbelievable, right? You go from 14 minutes to 20 to 30 to 90 hours potentially of swimming just
Mhm.
because of hope. It's such a damn statement of what hope can do, just for
Mhm.
that. And it's also a statement on what does it mean to give up, right? Because those rats weren't actually too tired to swim. They just sort of got defeated in the process of it, and they just stopped working as hard, and they just succumbed to their no one's coming, and they're going to die. And it's a
Mhm.
similar study that I've heard about people lost in the wilderness, that when they die, oftentimes in the wilderness, it's not because they ran out of food or water or bears or wolves got them or something like that. It's because they finally, after a few days, succumb to their situation and they sit down and they give up and they wait to
Mhm.
die. That's it. That's just how we are, animals and people alike. And so having that little bit of hope, these rats were able to go, I mean, unbelievable amounts of time increased. And so if you're looking at Benzo, which is a damn sure is a game of endurance and attrition, and you got to go the
Mhm.
long rounds, right? This is not going to be over in 2 months, chances are, more like a year or two for a lot of us or more. That becomes so important. So I can't say enough about the power of hope. And I think that scientific experiment beautifully shows the power of something like that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I, me being a musician and a guitar player, before the whole benzo damage thing happened, I was somebody who could just pick up the guitar and I would play and I would sing. And if I
Yeah.
was with somebody who, another musician, we'd, play some songs together. And it was like nothing. I didn't even think about it. It was just something that I naturally did.
Yeah.
But and I've talked about this in a video on my channel. It took me 6 years to get to the point where I could play guitar and sing in front of another person.
Yeah.
So some things have come back slowly. Some things have
Yeah.
really taken time.
Right.
But along the way, getting those glimmers of hope that, maybe one day again, I'll be able to, and if not, I'm going to practice gratitude for the things that I have gotten back and for the
Right.
healing that I have experienced and truly, truly practicing being grateful for those little wins, whatever
Right.
they are, whether is maybe you made it halfway out to the mailbox today. That's awesome.
That's right.
To go back in the house and give yourself a pat on the back and be easy on yourself through this process because it
Right.
is one of the hardest things I think somebody can go through. But yeah, I agree with everything you just said. That study is amazing. That's
Yeah.
incredible.
It is right.
Yeah.
I think Benzo's, it's such a fine line between looking at it all as just so with so much anger and regret and just it's so terrible. It's just such a terrible thing that none of us asked for. But on the other hand, the triumph, the story of recovery, the mountains that everyone, and you included, climbed. I say it's like getting thrown on Mount Everest, never climbing a day in your life, and you go, no guide, no
Right.
rope, learn to climb
Hmm.
the mountain. You have to reach the top. Your life depends on it. Go, you know. And to see someone do that, or sometimes climb multiple mountains, you go, this is a testament to the human spirit. This is a testament to what it means to be a damn human being. I mean, this is really profound, in my opinion, spiritual,
Hmm.
profound things. And so as a coach, the highs are really high and the lows are really lows, right? Because you
Hmm.
sometimes can't help everybody, and horrible things happen, and you're watching people suffer, and you're trying to give them hope, and you're trying to give them direction, and you're trying to keep them holding on, because you know that they're probably so much closer to freedom and recovery, but they're getting pulled from many directions. I deal with that a lot, where people get hopeless because of something they read or heard or something. But once you get them past that, and then they start to get momentum, they start to get better, they come off the drug, then they start to work on their pre-existing stuff, because it's usually there, and it's usually a little more ferocious for a while anyway. And then you watch them just make this complete transformation. You go, man, it's like watching Rocky in real life. Like, this is a real life Rocky story. I mean, Rocky's
Yep.
not even as triumphant as what we're talking about. Like, I mean, there's nothing like this. This is just incredible. And so that fuels me to no end to want to keep doing this.
Same exact thing. Yeah, 100%. That's exactly my experience too. I actually feel like, and I hope nobody takes this the wrong way, and I don't ever mean to minimize what anybody is going through, but I really do say that I feel like I'm a better, more whole, more complete person on the other side of going through that process than I
Yeah.
was before. I can confidently say that. And
Right.
if nothing else, I hope that statement gives somebody hope, because
You're right.
it's really true. It really has, as I say, like, it's fashioned me in the fire.
Yeah.
I've been tempered in fire.
That's right. 100%. I totally agree with that. And that's a big piece of my message too, is we don't just have to survive this. We don't have to come out of it mangled or in a wheelchair or something, that, how you picture in your mind what's going to happen on the other side. It's like you can literally come out of this a better person, a more
Mhm.
empathic person. I grew in so many ways coming through benzos. Now, I would never choose it. That's for damn sure. And I wouldn't want to do it
Right.
again. But I wouldn't be fair for me to say that it was all horrible and nothing good came of it. No, a lot of good things came of it. I became a better musician. I became a better artist. I became a better person. I became a better son, a lover, friend. I became more compassionate. I took my work I was in clinical psychology at the time, doing some of the work while I was going through it, which saved my life. And that's a whole nother story. But even then, everything took on a new meaning and a new seriousness. But not just serious. I learned how to balance everything, because I think as a younger guy, when I started going through it, I just found myself just sort of clawing at different things, trying to look for escapism, trying to, and then all the like trauma we were talking about earlier, like that taints you. That has a problem. You start to have weird relationships with people. You're maybe not as trusting, or you're always thinking someone's out to get you, or you take things more serious than you should, or whatever the problem is. We have these little defense mechanisms and maladaptive coping mechanisms, and none of that was on my radar before benzos. I didn't think about mental health hygiene. I didn't think about the
Mhm.
importance of self-care or a sleep routine or anything. I mean, I just was sort of living fast and focused on the future, and trying to pretend like the past didn't happen, completely not zen, just the opposite.
Mhm.
And so it was like, it forced me to grow in so many ways. And by the time I came out of that, I truly was like, I mean, it may sound silly, but I became a better musician. I became a better artist. My grades in my performance in college improved. My relationships improved. My health improved. I mean, all my health improved. My blood pressure, my just overall mental health. absolutely improved. And after it took a few years post benzos to keep working on, I'm still working on it. I still consider me very much a work in progress, you know, my life. And I don't think that will change. And I hope it doesn't change in a sense. I expect to be working on myself till I die, until I'm an old man, you know.
Yep.
Um,
Hmm.
I think of like, I think it was Picasso that even at like 70 finally said, I think I'm finally starting to get good at painting. You know, it's like,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
if you look at life
Yep.
like that, it's like, yeah, okay, I got a lot of work ahead of me, and that's okay. You know, and that's the thing too, is um, it's how you perceive what your work is. So if you look at it like, oh, I got all this homework and it's just so overwhelming, and I shouldn't have to do this, and you know, well, then you're going to collapse. But if you look at it as stepping stones to self growth and a better version of you, if you believe that your purpose is to become an individual and to actualize your potential, then it somehow strangely all fits in kind of perfectly. And suddenly
Hmm.
this benzo thing isn't the hate crime that I survived, but it's like this secret blessing that really changed my life. And I wonder, in ways that I couldn't know, that if that never happened, where would I be right now? I wouldn't be sitting
Right.
here talking to you. I don't know if I would have
Right.
finished school. I don't know anything how I would have been. I don't even know if I'd be alive now. Who the hell knows? You know,
Right.
so in a strange way, that horrible situation, there was something good that came out of it. And
Hmm.
for people listening, that may be really hard to hear right now, because you got a lot of anger and you're suffering. And when anyone's suffering, they just go, shut up. I don't want to hear that. You
Right.
don't understand. No, we understand. I'm just saying, on the other side of this, there's some beautiful things waiting for you, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a very, very good, like kind of bird's eye, high level view of being able to look back on it. And I can say everything that you just said, David, the exact same thing for me. Better, better at every facet of my life, and hope to keep getting better and keep changing. You know, I hope that, you know, if I'm sitting here talking to you a year from now, that I'm a different person then than I am sitting here right now today.
That's
It's
right.
always a work in progress for sure.
That's right. Now, you're a coach, right? You're doing benzo coaching. I know you do the
Right.
videos and things like that. Do you have a background in mental health at all? Or are you going to school, or how did you, what is your, like, your reference to all that? What are you doing to kind of beef up your expertise, so to speak?
So I became a peer support specialist just recently. So I'm actually working at a peer support center right now, helping people who are experiencing homelessness, mental health issues,
Oh,
addiction. I've worked with people in addiction for the past 7 years, being in recovery myself. I've set up meetings at psych wards and hospitals, at treatment centers, bringing meetings into various facilities, and just working with people one on one in addiction. I have a background in education, but
hmm.
I actually want to go back now and get my master's degree as a mental health counselor.
Yeah.
So that's my next stepping stone.
I
Yeah.
think that's smart, especially if you're going to be a coach and
Mhm.
you want to stay in this community. I definitely think it's very important to have some kind of background. Not everybody needs it. I mean, if you're going to be someone that just gives good advice, good benzo stuff, you probably already have a PhD in benzo, so that's safe to say. But the mental health stuff does help you get this broader perspective on things, and gives you some new tools to work with. And then, of course, you know, colleges and everything, then there's a ton of like postdoc work and researching, you know, reading good books like you were talking about earlier with was it Viktor Frankl, right? And I actually
Right.
had
Yeah.
just read his book again more recently, so that's interesting you brought that up. But there's so many. I mean, today there's more resources than ever right at our fingertips, you know, to learn how to do. I mean, even if you just go and take a couple courses in mindfulness, CBT, or ACT, or something like that, or DBT, all these damn initials are
Right.
acronyms, you know. But there's so much stuff out there. I think that's, yeah, I think that's important. So good, kudos to you, man. Um,
Yeah. Thank you.
yeah, so yeah, you hit my radar. A few people kept mentioning you, so I reached out, and then one of our first conversations, I think, on an email, was on fishing. I was like, "Oh, you're a fisherman," and I think that's even like in your channel, right? Like you bring that
Yeah.
into. So that's interesting. So I wanted to talk to you about that, because I'm a fisherman. Fish since I was like a little kid. I've got a boat. I live in Central Florida, surrounded by literally 100 lakes. I mean, it's what I love to do. And part of my recovery, after about a year, year and a half of tapering and working slowly, I had I remembered, hey, there's a lake, a small lake about a block down the road from me. And so I went down there and I found this old couple, and they had a dock there. And I said, do you mind if I just sit on your dock and fish? And they said, sure, okay. So I started, great, this is great exposure therapy. It's something, and the thing about exposure therapy too, it's not just about going out and putting yourself out there and flooding. That's exposure therapy is not flooding, right? That's the first approach to exposure therapy, and behavioral psychology was just like, if you're afraid of a spider, here, hold a spider until you're not afraid. You're afraid of an elevator, just ride the elevator till you're not. Excuse me. And as I said earlier, that can really backfire on you. So good exposure therapy, there's a reward system in there. There's something you're after that sort of rewards you for that effort. So, I have my pole, my little fishing gear, and I was like, God, I got to walk down this long, road to this pond, but then I get to fish. So that was a great reward system built in. And I fished, God, almost every day, I think, for a period of there, for a while, several months. And I found it to be amazing exposure therapy and nature therapy and mindfulness. And I mean, it was just all around amazing. I got sunlight, I got exercise, I got exposure, So that was one thing I wanted to talk to you about, because it sounds like maybe fishing was very therapeutic for you as well.
Oh yeah, yeah, it definitely was. I love this shifting gears into talking about fishing. It's
Yeah, we've been
awesome.
kind of dark. So
Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, that was the first time I remember going out fishing, I remember I was going through this period of anhedonia and I just felt nothing. It was just like this barren landscape. And I this is something that I love to do. I love being out in nature. I love being out in the sunshine. I love fishing in Florida. I love the whole experience
yeah,
of just like sitting in a boat, the feeling that you get, the soft rocking, everything about it. I love it. I'm in my element,
yeah,
that and playing music. But I remember I was just, early on when I went out, I just felt nothing. It was so devastating to me because this was something that I loved doing. And I just told myself, I'm gonna now show my dopamine reward system that we're gonna do this naturally now. There's no more pills, there's no more drugs coming in.
right.
And so I'm going to keep, repeating this behavior until I start to feel something from it. And
Right.
slowly I did, and
Yeah.
I remember, at one point going out and, I was in my canoe with my friend Anthony. Shout out to Anthony. He's my fishing buddy, one of my best friends in the world. And man, we just had a blast. And it's like the Heather Ashton talks about this in the Ashton Manual in one point, and I forget exactly what she says, but basically, to paraphrase, she says something about you feel like you come out of the fog and you feel the lights get turned on,
Yeah.
colors become vibrant again,
Yeah.
smells become vibrant, life just feels okay again. It feels like your world just kind of comes to life after walking out of this benzo fog
Yeah.
head thing, and I remember having that experience of being out there and fishing and being out in nature. And it was such a monumental time for me in my life where I could feel that something physiological was happening in my brain and something was happening in my spirit at the same time. I feel like I was getting some buoyancy. And so I definitely I advocate that for people. If there was something that you enjoyed at one time and you can possibly start to implement that, even if it's very slowly, um, try to start
Yeah.
whether it was riding a bike or, playing a musical instrument or singing or whatever it was.
Right.
And there might be a period of time where you don't feel anything from it. And that can
Right.
be completely natural because the brain's chemicals are still all jacked up and, the
Sure.
brain is trying to return to, homeostasis. And but I love fishing, and so I was around the Tampa area, so I would always go around like in little bays and bayous and estuaries,
Yeah.
doing a lot of saltwater fishing. But I also did
Oh.
a lot of inland fishing too. And my dad just passed away in January, but we used to go fishing all the time together up in Citrus County. So we would fish the Withlacoochee River up there,
Yeah.
You're probably familiar with that.
Hmm.
I lived in Ocala too, so I was there for a couple of years and used to fish around the Silver Springs area. So I know
Right.
that area really well too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love fishing down there. It's beautiful.
That's great. Yeah. Um, on the point of the anhedonia, that's definitely a situation where you just have to let go and keep faking it till you make it. It's the best treatment. I'm convinced of it. I
Mhm.
fished for a good period there. It got no joy. In fact, it was just anxious. I was just thinking
Mhm.
like, I'm scared. I don't want to sit here. I've got to walk back. What if I black out? Like all the stuff in my head, kept all the fear and anxiety circulating and ruminating. And it was just like this calamity that I couldn't shut off. It was constantly with me. And then slowly the calamity, the noise would start to calm down for a bit and I could focus on what I was doing. And then there would be little moments of slight joy that would peak itself. Colors would sort of go from gray to a slight color. And then absolutely, like you were describing, I remember, I think I talked about it in my book, that once once things had turned to a certain point, it was like technicolor. Like things were brighter and more colorful
Yeah.
and vibrant and radiating. And I was just like, what is going on here? And of course, the anxious brain of me almost got scared by it, of like, what is this? I've got now I thought it was like a symptom or something. Like what is
Yeah.
what is going on with my brain? It's oversaturated. But it
Too
was a
many
good thing.
colors.
Yeah, it was very strange, and I became very emotional, and I was like just a big crybaby. I'd watch like
Mhm.
Rocky or something, and I would just cry when he finally, turned that corner. I was just like, oh my God, what the hell is happening to me? But I
I
was
remember I
so
did that with a Publix commercial one time. Yeah.
right. I think because you go from a place where you're so like disconnected and cold and just ran by fear and darkness, that when that technicolor and all that vibrancy comes back, you just feel like a puddle. You're just like, oh, you're so empathic at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's when that big turnaround happens and you start to feel that once again, yeah, it's indescribable, It is like it's like a paint by number painting all of a sudden going from like, black and white to you're just filling in like one
Yeah,
little number at a time, and then you step back from it at some point and you're like, wow, this actually is starting to look a little pretty. This is starting to look
yeah,
like something.
yeah. Where are you located now? Where about?
So I'm in North Carolina now,
Right, right.
in northwestern North Carolina, about an hour from the mountains. Just moved
Okay.
up here about a year ago, but I was
Oh,
down in Florida for 18 years, so I was down there a long time.
yeah.
Yeah,
That's great. I lived
and it
up
was
in North Georgia, kind of similar area, I think, Rabun County, Macon, up there in the tri-state area.
okay. Is that the Blue Ridge area, Blue Ridge
Yeah,
Mountain
Blue
area?
Ridge. Yep. Yep. That's it. I
Okay,
lived on, yeah, I lived
yeah.
on those mountains. Um, so you're still fishing, I take it, and then doing all that?
Oh my God, you know what? I actually haven't been fishing for a year since I've moved up here. I've just been so many life changes, so many things have gone on.
Hmm.
Plus, making videos and,
Right.
being on social media and coaching. So I'm working full time and coaching as of right now, coaching on the side part time.
Hmm.
Two kids. I just haven't had time. I
Yeah, I
need to
hear
get
you.
out though.
I
Yeah,
hear
I
you.
had a big kayak, but I just sold it to downsize to a small. It was a 14 foot, so it was
Oh,
it was huge. It was a
right.
really nice kayak, but I just sold it. I'm going to downsize and start getting around in these lakes around here. But now it's already getting to be late October, so it
Yeah.
might not be till spring when I get back out.
Yeah, and in Florida, it's like, and we're entering into the fish and bass season and all of that. So we're actually finally, with Florida, it's just about the wind. It's so damn windy here,
That's it.
So every time
Yeah.
we have a trip, it's like you're bass fishing. It's not really great to be blown around the damn lake.
No, that's the one thing in fishing that I couldn't say. And anything else, like the cold, the heat, I didn't mind. But when you're fishing in wind, it's pretty tough.
It's so terrible. Yeah, and blowing you all around. And you got a little boat, and it's just whipping you around the damn lake and turning the boat around. And so what do? You drop anchor, and then you fish for 5 minutes, and then you're bored, and you pick up the anchor, and then you troll somewhere else, and then drop the anchor. And I'm like, this is annoying. I want that.
Yeah,
Plus, you want that flat water. It's just something perfect about just still, flat, placid water.
it's beautiful. I love it. I love that. Again, that feeling of when you first get on the water and you first feel that buoyancy. There's something about that.
Yeah.
that I love that. And October was actually one of my favorite months to go out because it was
Yeah.
kind of that turning of the season where it starts to be so not hot as hell, and
That's
just
right.
start to cool off just a little bit. And for some reason, I don't know, I always have the best luck in October. I don't know
Yeah.
why.
Yep. Um, you said you were a musician too. You mentioned that a couple times. Tell me a
Hmm.
little bit about that if you don't mind.
Yeah, so started playing guitar when I was 14, and right away got a band together, played all throughout high school, played in various bands throughout my early 20s. Kind of took a break from it as I was going back to college, but then in my mid to late 20s, got another band together that was together for a few years, recorded, actually did a really good album that we recorded up in Athens, Georgia. Um, and but since when Benzo damage hit, I just all of that, playing in
Right.
bars, going on stage, I couldn't even think about it at that
Mm,
time. I couldn't. It was so far away from anything that I could possibly do
right.
that for a while I just kind of, even playing like my fingers on the fretboard, like the way that they would feel.
Hmm.
I couldn't handle it. It was like too much sensory overload. I couldn't take the
Right.
sound. So I actually put it down for probably 6 months to a year before I even started coming around the guitar again. Um, and now I just play by myself. I don't really do anything out, or, I don't have time. If I had some time, I probably would love to do that. And, maybe in the future I will, but man, I just love music. Music's
Yeah.
always been a huge part of my life. It just, it does something to me and for me that nothing else does. It's therapeutic. It's healing.
Yeah, it is.
Listening to music, like you mentioned, taking a bath and putting on, Enya, or whatever it is that you
Yeah.
find soothing. It definitely does a lot for me, and I'm really really grateful that I have a background in music. I've got
Yeah.
a little electric piano. Actually, it's a really big electric piano that I play sometimes too. So now when I just get an hour or two, of free time, I might pick it up a couple times a week, but
Yeah.
that's about it for me right now. What about you? Are you playing?
Yeah, similar as you. I think I was probably 16, 15, 14, somewhere in there, started playing guitar. Actually, I started as a vocalist, and I say that very loosely. This was like the mid 90s, so it was a whole different world. I feel like now I feel so old and the world's changed
Right.
so much, but the 90s were rock was everything, and you had grunge, and you had all these great Seattle bands, and things were
Hmm.
still very cool. And that was a time where like everybody played guitar. I moved to this new uh little duplex, and my next door neighbor had he had this guitar that he built, or his dad built or something, and it was just atrocious. The string stood up about like that high off the thing, and your fingers would bleed trying to play it, and it couldn't hold a tune. It was just horrific, and had this little like 8-inch PV amp, and we blast it. And so we had a little group of friends, and I remember we had two bassists and this kid playing guitar, and then they would it was just the most god awful calamity of sounds. We're trying to play like Deftones or something, and then the guitarist kid would go, Dave, sing. I'm like, you're not even playing a. There's not even a hook. There's not a. It's not even like the same thing. It's just It's like jamming to like Grateful Dead or something, but in a really
Yeah.
horrible way. And I just remember that I was like, sing what? How do I? What do I? It's constantly changing. And so eventually I was like, I don't like this. This is stressful, and just I feel like I'm just sitting on this side of the room being yelled at by this kid. And then I remember he let me hold his guitar one night, and I laid in bed and I played just on the low the high E string, and I just played what was it? Unforgiven. Ba, ba,
Mm.
ba, 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 da, da, da. And I figured that out. And I went back the next day and I showed him, and he got mad, and he took the guitar back and he said, "Don't play my guitar." And I was like, "What the hell?" You know, it was there's so many funny, so I could tell you there. But anyway, that introduced me to guitar, and I was like, "Whoa, that's cool." And eventually he like worked and saved up a little bit of money and got a little cheap Epiphone, I think it was, and then I got a little cheap PV guitar amp, and um became a guitarist essentially. I still did a little bit of vocals, but I was more interested in like making melodies, and I got into playing a lot of the metal music that was coming out at the time. A lot of drop D, drop C tuning, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
And yeah, it just took off. And then I played, and then that bridged into other things, acoustics and jazz and blues and whatever, as you get older and your taste grows. And we played in a lot of bands. Started working on an album, did some live shows, coffee shops, all that stuff when things started to change. I mean, up to that point, you could just like jam in a skating rink or a skating rink or like a garage or whatever. It was like weird where you would have these little jam, little mini shows. So yeah, I did pretty good. And we were writing really good music, and I lived right outside Orlando. So I spent a lot of time in my teens to early 20s, even really mostly in that mid-teen range, going to like the House of Blues. And we would dress the part, we'd try to look like little rock stars and all that. We were all into that. And then we would there was a side entrance there where the tour buses would come through. So we learned about that. We're like, oh, that's where the tour buses come through. We'd sneak behind the fence, and we get thrown out half the time. But every once in a while,
That happened to me too at that same
yeah.
House of Blues.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, I'm talking about there, right? The
Yeah,
Virgin
yeah,
Record
yeah.
store that was right across the street. Do
Yeah,
you remember that
I
thing?
know exactly which one you're talking about. Yep.
What era? Dude, we probably were at the same place sometimes then, man. What time? What year
Well, I
was
tried
that?
to sneak in there a couple times in 2000. This was probably around 2005 or six.
Okay.
Would
Yep.
have been when I
Yep.
was trying to sneak in the back door and the side door of the House
Yep.
of Blues.
Yeah, that big fence. Yep. And I
Yeah.
remember we were out there one day, and Slipknot had come out, but they didn't have their mask on. This is before we didn't even really know who they were. In fact, it was like, I think that was our introduction, and they took pictures with us, and they said, "Come on back here," and they let us into the back, and now we're going through the back kind of corridor to where the bands are hanging out, and it's like this crazy little party scene back there, and the buses are all lined up, so they're partying on the buses, and I mean, it was like the last, to me, it was like the last rock star kind of era, because things change,
Mhm.
probably for the best now. Now rock stars are like vegan and they exercise and they don't, which is probably better, right?
Right.
It's a better
Yeah,
message
yeah,
for
it's
sure.
healthier for sure.
It's a lot
Yeah.
healthier. But back then, I mean, it was just crazy. These guys, seeing like bands like Cold Chamber, just walking around with a bottle of wine, drinking, and people doing all kinds of madness. But
Hmm.
we started befriending them, and since we looked kind of like them, we were trying to look like them anyway. We got past security. So once we got past that fence, we were kind of like, no one batted an eye. We had the same look. So we just hung out with these guys and pretended to be, like we were some opening band. And they'd look at us, how the hell
Nice.
did you get here? Who the hell are you? And yeah, I remember, funny, one time we ran into a band, Full Double Jacket, was big at the time, this band, and we had met them and become friends with them. We kept going to shows, and they were doing a series of shows around the same time in Orlando and Tampa. So we kept meeting them. So we became kind of friendly with them, found them on Facebook, or back then it was MySpace, and we had this little rapport with them. So I end up in Guavaween, I think it was, in Tampa. I think it was Guavaween. You really had that big thing.
Yeah,
And
Busch Gardens, yeah.
it,
Or
no, it was God, what was it? It was when they blocked off the streets, and it was like Mardi Gras,
okay,
and it was
yeah,
this
yeah, okay.
long. I mean, it was so many people, and so we run into these guys. Just happened to run into them in the crowd, the guitarist and the bassist, and I was like, oh my god, it's the two guys from the band. So I went up to them and I said, oh, you're those guys from Nickelback. And they looked at me like, they wanted to punch me out. And they said, oh, it's you. And they started laughing. So we hung out, and we walked up to, to where the stage was. And then there was a fence there and all the buses. And they said, come on back here with us. I was like, oh yeah. So me and my bassist was with me that day. And we went back there and hung out on the tour bus with them, and like Fuel and Finger 11 and Godsmack. And it was like all these great bands, and they're looking at us like, who the hell are these kids? And then I remember there was this big fence and we were on the other side. So that was the cool thing of being on the other side of the fence with the bands, because you're always on the one side going like, can I get an autograph? But we were hanging out with them. And I remember we were hanging out by the fence, and there was Fuel and not Finger 11, Fuel and Godsmack were signing autographs. And we were standing there, and these kids had come up and they said, what band are you with? And I just said, Finger 11. And they said, "Oh, I love that. Can I get your autograph?" So we signed it. We're like, and then I remember looking over and the lead singer of Fuel. You remember the band Fuel? I don't know if you
Oh
remember
yeah,
that
yeah.
band. Brett,
Mhm.
his name was, and he looked at me and he goes, "What the? You're not in Finger 11." I said, "Shh." And they just laughed, they were like, "You guys," but they got it because we were all, they even said, we were the same way as you, sneaking into Kiss concerts and trying to look like them, and pretending to be somebody. And so it was a lot of good memories like that.
Somebody somewhere's got a autograph of
I think
Finger
about that.
11. Thinking
Yeah.
it's
Yeah, I
funny.
wonder if they figured it out, but it was so funny turning around. He's just standing there looking at me like, "You little shit. I know
Yeah.
those guys. You're not," it's like, hey, they don't know that. Let them have it. But yeah,
Yeah, that's funny,
we
man.
that drove inspired us so much to want to be in bands, because you constantly were meeting all the people you loved and listened to on the radio, and then of course as time just changed, it just sort of fell apart. The music scene changed drastically around that 2005 era and onwards. Like pop became
Hmm.
huge and metal and rock was just dwindling and going away, and then people get married. We would start to write an album, and then the bassist got married and would try
Oh
to
yeah.
replace him, and then the drummer went to rehab or whatever. Just things kept, and I was like, finally, this isn't going to happen. And I started playing guitar again. I stopped playing for a few years, and then in the middle of Benzo started playing again because I knew it would be good for neuroplasticity. And like you said, there was so much anhedonia. It hurt my fingers. It was overstimulating. I didn't think it was going to really be helpful. I wasn't sure, but I just channeled it. I would play a little chords here and there. I was picking, and no more metal. I mean, it was just an acoustic. So I don't recommend metal playing if you're going to benzo withdrawal,
All right.
right? But I
No
would
slip
play.
knot. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I was playing like Neil Young and things like that. Sad, soft, somber songs that kind of spoke to my heart. Old Lennon tunes and stuff.
Yeah, I love
And
that stuff.
yeah, and then it started to really have an effect. And it really was one of the first things that I did that gave me feelings again. Because I remember just being in this cold, dark place. And I remember the song too, was Tom Petty, I Keep Crawling Back to You, I think it was. It
I
was
love that song.
from the Wildflowers
Mhm.
album.
I was
I
just playing Wildflowers
It's such
earlier
a
this morning.
yeah,
Yeah.
what a great
Hmm.
album. And I believe it was
Hmm.
that song, and if I'm not mistaken, I might be mixing it up, but I know there was a lyric where he says, "I'm so tired of being tired," or "I'm so sick
Hmm.
and tired of being sick and tired," or it was something to that effect. And then he said, "Most things I worry about never happen anyways."
Happened anyway. Yep.
Yeah, and oh man, it almost made me cry. I mean, it really just like something surged over me of an emotion, and it wasn't just fear. It was, and I think I did probably cry, and I was just like, oh my God, I felt something. I cracked the ice a little bit. Some like trickle of light got through, and so
Yeah.
I just started playing more and more and searching for it and playing the Stones and Counting Crows. And I just started playing all this emotional music, and my whole style had changed so much. I started, so I played for a year coming off of benzos, and then I played for the next 5 or 6 years almost religiously. I mean, I built a studio in my house, and started got a couple of friends. We started writing again, but this time it wasn't metal. It was a lot of like, I don't know if you're familiar with like Damien Rice, that kind of
Hmm.
acoustic, kind of
Oh yeah.
pretty melodic stuff. And then of course that fell through because then he got married and had a kid and moved away, and it was just like, God, man, every time I get something going, so then it became, well, maybe I'll just do the live shows at like the local bars, and do a bunch of covers and then try to sneak in a couple of my originals here and there, you know and we tried to do that for a little bit, and then you kind of quickly go, I don't really like this environment, especially after benzos. I don't want to be around a bunch of rowdy alcoholics treating me like a jukebox, you know what I mean,
Right. Yeah.
shouting songs at
Hmm.
me. And it's just like, no, don't want to do that. But anyway, for the greater message of people listening for benzo recovery, I cannot say enough good things that about playing music regularly for those few years, especially coming off of benzos. I truly think it built a lot of neuroplasticity. It gave me my feelings back. I spent a lot of time, not to sound like a baby, but almost crying when I played, getting choked up. But I
Hmm.
welcomed it because I didn't have that. I
Yeah.
wanted that. I welcomed it. I'm okay with that. I know it's heavy, but it's better than feeling nothing. And then those things turned into prettier, softer, more happy, uplifting songs. And, you slowly climb out of that pit, I think. And yeah, if you have that background in music, definitely use it. It's such a valuable tool in your arsenal that you might be overlooking. And if you don't have it, maybe consider getting an acoustic, a little cheap acoustic, learning to play 2 or 3 chords. Dylan's pretty simple, and then just
Hmm.
start somewhere, right?
I would highly recommend that too. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it becomes a safe place to express your emotions too for the first time in maybe a long time.
Yeah.
For a lot of us who have had those repressed emotions, it becomes a safe place for me. I've always expressed myself. I feel better not through words. I don't feel like I'm a good talker, but I feel like I can do it better through music. And
Yeah.
I felt like that was always my way of expressing myself. So even today, when I sit down and play, you know, first of all, I think it stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system. Even singing,
Yeah.
humming does that, the vocalization. But it becomes a safe place for me to express myself and become acquainted again with those emotions that I was kind of afraid of. I was afraid of depression again because I didn't want to go back to that dark hole. I was afraid of anxiety, of course, because I had it constantly. So yeah, it was a hugely therapeutic tool. And if you get a cheap acoustic, I mean, if
Mhm.
you learn 3 or 4 chords, you could play 100 songs.
Yeah, that's
You
right.
don't need to learn a whole bunch of stuff. You can really start playing songs quickly. And that's when I teach somebody, Smoke on the Water is like
Hmm.
three notes. And they're like, oh my God, I can play a song, and
Yeah.
kind of gets you going down that route.
Yeah, it does. And then once you'll get to a place where you'll play a lot of covers, and then you'll actually start being able to kind of play your own little melodies. And
Mm-hmm.
like you said, 3 chords, GCD, and you could make 1,000 songs out of just something like that. Yeah, music was a lifesaver. I still play. As you see the guitar in the back, I got a Les Paul back there. I've got too many guitars at this point. A big twin
Mm-hmm.
reverb 65 reissue amp behind me.
Oh,
And
that's nice.
yeah, I love the Beatles. I loved Lennon. It was very much inspired
Me
by,
too.
so as you're a guitarist or a musician, you find the people you love and then you study what they played. So I have the guitar behind me is like literally a remake of, not a remake, but the same type of guitar, a mahogany body LP that Lennon played on often. And the
Yep.
65 reverb, the Beatles cut the White Album on that amp. So
Mm-hmm.
you just find those things, and then of course you don't sound as good as them, but it gives you a little edge.
Yeah. I'm a huge Beatles fan too, and I know that I'm familiar with the 65 reverb too. Yeah, I've got a Vox AC-15 because I'm a huge Beatles fan too, and
Yeah,
Les Paul Jr. that I love playing on. A lot
yeah.
of my other stuff I sold when I was in my addiction and haven't recouped that stuff yet, but
Oh,
there was a lot that went bye in my heyday to
do you
pawn
do
shops.
do you do any other kind of art, creative things? Just music?
Music is really the main one. I dabble a little bit with you know, uh, I do crayon drawings, but that's mostly just for my own therapeutic
I see. Right.
value. Yeah, it's nothing that I would really present to anybody else.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I had a career as a fine artist, which is a very hard thing to do. Granted, it wasn't like buying new cars or anything. Yeah, I think even the most successful artists are pretty broke for the most part. But it
Hmm.
was it was it was happening. I would play show art, or to call them like gigs, almost like music. I would have gigs in like Los Angeles, New York, Montreal, um Italy. I didn't go to all those places, not out of the country. I went to New York and Los Angeles and stuff, but things were popping off and were really happening for me at that time. And I had become, at a very early age, like in my early 20s, mid 20s, I had like this crazy budding career, and suddenly found myself in these big galleries with like some of the best artists on the planet. Suddenly I was playing galleries with like somebody who became a good friend and a bit of a mentor of mine, and Chet Zar, who was the artist. He's a great painter. I mean, he's a master painter, but he was doing the artwork for the band Tool. He did a lot of
Oh wow.
their covers and stage designs and things like that. And he was, he also worked in Hollywood as a special effects makeup artist. So he was just a great person, awesome, open minded, brilliant artist. And he got me into Los Angeles. I had found him on like Facebook or something and just reached out to him, and then he saw my work and said, "Hey, you could do good in LA." And I went, "Yeah, right. I'm in Central Florida, man. I'm out here in the woods. Like LA might as well be Mars. But it happened, and was able to have a great career up into the point of Benzos, and then once that whole ride hit, it was just devastating, because then, like, almost overnight, the creativity's gone. It just left
Hmm.
you. And for someone who's not creative, it's so hard to convey what that's like, because if you're like a expert tile layer, right? Like, you're just great and you build a business and you know everything about tile and you do all this, and you get sick with benzos. When you come off benzos, you can still lay tile. You didn't forget how to do that. You might be a little rusty or something. But as a creative person, once that creativity goes away, it's like, oh no, oh no. I kind of
Hmm.
remember the technique of it, but I can't create. I'm like, it's like having that skill just gone. Like, it just took
Yeah.
20 years of what I had worked for and was gone. And not knowing if it would come back was terrifying. It was
Hmm.
it was really depressive. And I watched my career that I was building. And a lot of art is like any, like music or anything, you have to stay very relevant and you have to keep creating. And so you can't disappear for 3 or 4 years and everybody's gone. The parade passes you by. And so I became very hopeless, and fell into a lot of despair, losing that ability to create. But the silver lining was, coming out of benzos, like I said, helped rejuvenate me and make me a better person. I actually went back and I started critiquing the things that I didn't do well, and was like, I need to go back and I want to refine this. So I took a lot more training and studying and dove a lot deeper, took it a hell of a lot more serious, and then kind of, I want to say reinvented, but came back stronger than ever, and then got my feet underneath me, and then was able to kind of resume that career for the most part. Well, the world had changed a bit too. So, for example, like, now you don't need the galleries as much as you used to. You can sell online, you can sell on Etsy. If you have a good social media following, you can do some pretty good things. But 20 years ago, that wasn't the case, really. Even then, you needed the gallery, who was like the mafia. you know they were like the mafia. You work, say, 50 hours to make a painting, and then they go, well, I guess I'll show it. Here's the thing: we're going to take 60 to 70% of your earnings,
Oh,
and you can't,
wow.
yeah, and then you can't work with any other galleries. There was all these rules, and then they start telling you what to paint and how to paint it, and it just you found yourself in this world that was like, oh, this is not what I signed up for. Which I guess is kind of similar to the stories I hear with musicians, in a sense. Like, they get sucked into this like contract or something, and they think all these things are going to happen, and they might even get fronted some money, but then they don't realize that money is
Hmm.
actually going to be taken away from them to pay for
Right.
everything else. And then finally you have some producer telling you to make songs like the hit that was good on the other album. And so, um yeah, it was a hell of a wild ride. But now I think I'm a much better artist when I get to create, because now this has taken up a hell of a lot of my life, so I don't really have as much time. And now, actually, I don't just still do the painting and the portraits and all the works that I do, but I've gotten into indie filmmaking. So that's been a big thing for the last 5 years for me. We put out like several films. We just shot a feature for Benzo Recovery. We actually shot our first
Awesome.
feature. I don't know if you saw anything about that. I have it on my
I
channel.
did. Hmm.
Um, yeah, so that was incredible. We raised like $6,000 for it. I funded the rest, more than matched that out of my pocket, and then spent 2 years shooting this thing, and been editing it. So that's close to coming out. Um, Love film. With drawing, you get one picture to tell a story, but with film, you get 23 frames a second to tell a story. So it's a whole different ball game in that. And you can just, and that's what I realized. Whether I was a musician, a poet, a writer, I've written like 3 novels. I'm like kind of a Renaissance artist. I love everything creative. But what I started to realize, the overarching theme and all of that was, I had a story I wanted to tell. And I kept trying
Hmm.
to find a way to tell. That's what music is. That's what good songwriting is. It's just
Yep.
storytelling, right? Poetry, storytelling, novels with storytelling. Being an artist is storytelling, you know. And now making indie films is like just so rewarding because I can bring all of those elements in. I was a photographer major in college. Oh, bring that into the cinematography, the story writing that I do, the sense of an artist and aesthetics, bring that into play. The music, it
The
finally
music,
found.
everything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was such a blessing in a sense that like I was almost a jack of all trades and a master of none, so to speak. But I just thought, wow, just keep pushing all of those things in the right direction and something will happen. And then when film came around, I was in such a strange advantageous position because most of the directors and people I worked with, they only had one thing. Like if you were a director, you were just a director, or you were just a writer, or you were just the sound guy, or whatever. But I had all this stuff. I already knew what sound engineering looked like because I'd done that for 20 years trying to make music and stuff. And it was like, oh my God, all these tools that were just sort of sitting there that didn't have a place in their own to make like a real big change. Together, they fit beautifully into this thing of filmmaking. You know what I mean? It was a very cool thing, how it all came together. Uh, because up to that point, you start to feel like maybe you wasted your time, and you thought, well, maybe if I just would have just stuck with the one thing and put all
Right.
my eggs in that basket, something bigger would have happened. And I started to feel like
Yeah.
maybe I played it wrong. And I did have mentors and other artists that said the same thing. You're like, you're going to become a jack of all trades, a master of none. But I said, well, what do you do when your inner voice, your calling is driving you to all these other things? You just shut them off? Because that didn't feel like the right path. I would have been happy if it was just music, but then I wanted to take photos and write this so it all came full circle. So I can't wait to share that. Sorry if I
That's
ramble. I
amazing.
ramble a lot.
No, it's cool how you described how you've had all these different artistic avenues, but we're able to, at this point, at least like at this juncture, bring them all together to put something together, telling a
Yeah.
story. Just like you said,
Right.
it's the same thing with me when I sit down to either write a song or listen to a song. It's a story every
Yeah.
single time. Those are the best creations, I think, and those are the ones that are timeless. The
Right.
ones that tell that good story and can tell it in a way that's compelling and captivating.
Hmm.
So to bring all those together, that's awesome. It's
Yeah,
amazing.
and especially for this cause. It's one thing to
Hmm.
make a little fun vampire film or whatever, but when we sat down to do Lake of Fire, which is the feature film, it was like, wow, I'm making something that I think could really matter, that could really help people. If I could do my job, and then it became a hell of a lot of pressure. He's like, don't mess this up. Don't waste these
Right.
people.
Yeah.
Don't waste the people's money that invested in this. You got to nail everything now. The sound, the look, the acting, the writing, everything. And a feature film is like a massive undertaking. I mean, a 5 minute film is a massive undertaking for anyone who's never done it. I mean, it really is incredible. It will humble you. But yeah, I think this could be really big because, and you probably relate to this as a Benzo coach. Like one of the things I deal with so much that frustrates me more than anything is the damn family and friends around my clients that don't get it, that gaslight them, that tell them,
Hmm.
have you considered staying on the drug? And you're doing this to yourself and just walk it off. And you're being
Right.
stubborn. And it's like, oh man, if you guys only knew how terrible those things you're saying are to the people that you say you love,
It's
you know
devastating. Yeah.
it's so
Hmm.
devastating and it can push them right over the damn edge. It's
Hmm.
cruel is what it is, but they don't get it because they're looking at it with their limited little perception of what they think it is. Well, maybe the doctor's right. No, maybe they're not, and you're not either. So that infuriated
Hmm.
me. So when we started to set out to do this film, I said I don't want to make something that's just going to be validating for the audience of Benzo people, which is certainly was right up the top of the list, right? You wanted something you could watch and go, that's me, that's what I'm going through, and then hopefully have a message of hope and some clues on what to do or how to handle it, to kind of slide in something good in there. But also I wanted to make this film for the family and the friends. So the hard ass husband that didn't get it, or the brother-in-law or whatever, the family member that just didn't get it. that they can watch this and hopefully get pulled into the characters, the protagonist story, and in a way that disarms them. And suddenly they find themselves empathizing with this person and living vicariously through what they're going through, and then seeing the people that reflect them in the story. And it's going to be kind of a hard pill to swallow to say, "Ugh, that's me. That's what I was doing to them, and that's how they're actually being affected." And I didn't realize that. And my hope is that if they can share it with their family, that the family will have some kind of change of heart or a deeper insight, because I don't know what it's like to be in Vietnam, but when I watch Platoon or some of these old films, you get a sense of it and you go, wow, that's what that was like. Okay,
Mhm.
that's very different. You have empathy and a whole different perception of it. So that's the hope anyway.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah. I mean, that's awesome. And yeah, Platoon. So I was thinking of those Oliver Stone films have a way of putting you right there sometimes, giving you that emotional perspective of a
Yeah,
taste maybe of what it was like.
right. That's what you want. We all need that. That's what good storytelling is. It's
Hmm.
it's it's evolution in a sense. It's us evolving through the handing down of these vicarious or these situations that we can learn from. So to me, that's what all good art is something like that, versus like my Sharona. It's from
Right.
pop songs, or whatever. I don't even know. I don't listen to pop anymore. I got to use a pop song from the 80s to
Right.
date
That-
to date myself.
That's awesome. I hope a lot of people see it. I hope it's successful when it comes out.
Yeah, thank you, man.
That's great.
So what kind of things do you have going on and coming in the future? What's the next 2 to 3 to 5 years look like for you? What's happening?
So right now on the coaching front, I'm working with Dr. Joseph Witt-Doring on his team, and I know he's putting together a whole kind of Benzo school program that
Okay.
people can go through. So working on that right now. Getting my master's degree in mental health counseling is one of the big things that I'm going to be doing in the next couple of years.
Great.
Um, and other than that, I just plan to keep making videos. My TikTok is growing, my YouTube channel keeps growing, Instagram. So I plan to be here, for everybody in the Benzo community, keep doing what I'm doing and keep progressing, keep getting better. Like we said earlier,
Yeah.
I hope that a year from now, if I sit down and talk to you, that I'm a different person. I'm a little bit more evolved. I've
Right.
learned a lot more than the person that I am today. So yeah, education, maybe some music stuff. I don't know. I've been
Yeah.
talking to some guys around here that are playing music. So just keep growing and keep healing
Right.
too. I say that if I can get to 100% healed, then I'm gonna try to get there. But if I don't heal any further than where I've gotten to today, I'll be very content. I'll be very happy.
Right. And now is your plan to stick with Whit Doring and be part of that team, or are you wanting to branch off into your own solo thing, or what's the future look like there?
Yeah, I actually do it by myself solo too. So I am with Whit Doring, but I also offer my coaching services through my website and through you can find all the links on my YouTube channel and stuff too in the description.
Yeah.
So yeah, either way, I plan to keep doing both.
Okay. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And have you thought about writing a book or anything like that? You're
I
sharing your
have. I've
story?
actually I've started one. I've
Yeah.
started one. Now it's just a matter of taking the time to keep going. But I've got about the first chapter done.
Right.
I've got the outline. I know what I want to talk about. I know where I want it to go. I know what I want to say. I'm just kind of. It's one of those things where you're creating this, coaching business. You're creating online. You're doing stuff and you're like, okay, what's the next logical step here? Like, do I create the website now? Do I, offer
Right.
a different coaching package? Do I do the book now?
Yeah.
So the book is one of those things that's probably another step or two in the future for me, but I do have one in the works. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, and I think so far it sounds like you're doing it right. You're just taking it organically, and not the reality is not everybody's going to be able to do what we do or will be well received. You just don't know. It's like stock, you just don't know if it's going to
Right.
pay off or, you know. I remember, and I joke about this all the time, that like one of the very first videos that I posted and I had my face in, which by the way, I had the lighting set right, and I look like Nosferatu right here. I'm glowing in white, like I'm a damn vampire. And I didn't want to stop and adjust it, but now I
Yeah.
realized the lighting changed here. I don't normally glow like this. If you see moths landing on me, it's not an illusion. God, where was I going with that?
The first video you made, you
Oh,
said
the very first
that you
video.
just
Yeah.
showed your face.
Yeah. Thank you. So yeah, I was trying to hide that because I didn't know. I thought I would just put out some content and I'd go back to the art or something. And then I put out a little bit more. And then, before you know it, you're coaching and everything. But I put out that very first video. And I remember somebody left a comment and they said, I stopped listening after 15 seconds because I couldn't stand his stupid face. And I went,
Oh my God.
what? I just started
Just tell
laughing.
me how you feel. God.
Yeah, I started laughing and I thought, wow, it's so brutally insulting. It's almost funny, but it was
Yeah.
hurtful, but funny. And I was like, I never have shut off a video, a help video, especially on benzos, right? That because I didn't like a guy's face. I go, what the hell? What am I getting into? And it almost made me just want to
Right.
never do it again. I was like, that was a mistake. I'm deleting the video. I knew I shouldn't have showed my face. What the. But of course, it's just one person that's going to say something negative, and you'll get a lot more. But you sort of do have to just put it out there and then see how will they like you, will they not like you, will they relate to you, will they
Mhm.
not relate to you. And what I've found now is if you're sincere and just be who you really are, don't put on the fake voice and the persona and the whole thing. Just be who
Mhm.
you are. People love real people, and there's a place for all of us. There's going to be someone that will relate to you but can't quite relate to me. They're just going to relate to something about your style, your clothing, your look, the way you talk, your story, your age, your gender. They're just going to relate to you. And then all the coaches, they're just I feel like that's how it is. It's we need all the personalities and we need all the colors and all the different approaches and all of it. It really does have its own place. The thing that nuts me out is when I hear some absolute talks. I don't like absolutes. I don't think you should tell someone that they absolutely cannot take an antidepressant coming off benzos because
I
they
agree. Yeah.
absolutely have to eat carnivore diet or the go keto or or
Mhm.
again exposure therapy absolutely doesn't work. I don't like any of those absolute talks, and I think
Mhm.
you do a great disservice when you talk like that because you might be disarming someone for the one tool that might save their life.
Absolutely. Yeah. 100%. Totally agree with that. Yeah. I think, and I made a video about this, but not to go too much into it. But at the end of the day, I want to see people empowered to make their own choices too, what they think is best for them. So if they're at point A and they want to get to point B, then whatever seems like it might be best to get that person from here to that other place, from this island to this one. Let's get them across the water. Let's create a bridge, and whatever that bridge is, it might be different. For me, it might be sitting in my room playing guitar. For somebody else,
Right.
might be something completely different. But
Right.
yeah, I'm with you on that. The absolutes, in any regard, are not oftentimes healthy. I was going to say never healthy, but that would be an absolute.
Right. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And I've seen everything at this point. I've been doing this for a while, and even things that you would not recommend to be done, I've seen it. Things be successful and things not be successful, and it's kind of challenging when someone asks me, will like write me, and I get written like every day, more emails and things I can usually even keep up with, but they want absolute answers. What diet should I be on? What should I do? And I'm like, and then you almost feel like they look at you and go, I thought you knew a lot about this. It's like, but this, you got to understand, there's no one size fits all.
Mm-hmm.
So vegan might be the best thing for you, and carnivore or keto or Mediterranean, it might be who knows. I say if it works, don't argue with success. I'll have people like,
Right.
oh, I took CBD, and but I read in the forum you can't take CBD. I said, is it helping? Oh, it helps tremendous. Then take CBD.
Then do it, right? Yeah.
That's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
If it works, don't
Mm-hmm.
stop. And so many times people will say, I was doing this and I stopped doing it and it was working, but because somebody else told me, and I'm like, that doesn't
Right.
make any sense. Just stick with what works. We all have different chemistry and factors that are in our story.
Mm-hmm.
Um, one thing I want to ask you before we get going, and we've been talking a bit here, is how do you differentiate benzo withdrawal from the things that you were battling earlier in your life, like the trauma or the depression or anxiety, and the things that might have come from benzo. So what is the price of laying in bed for 6 months, for example, like for me, and becoming utterly agoraphobic, or developing incredible panic disorder or health anxieties or food phobias or insomnia? I mean, I had a plethora of not just symptoms, but those symptoms had started to become their own kind of conditions, mental little forms of mental illness. Now, fortunately, for anyone listening, not to freak you out if that's the case, and I think more times than not it is the case, um, these aren't, I wouldn't say they're like quote unquote true illnesses, because they're not something like they all came from benzo, so they can very much disappear rather quickly into a really high degree. But I found that, and certainly with most of my clients, that there's usually some things that stick, and it might just be, I came off of benzos, I'm 2 years out, man, I still have a hell of a lot of anxiety. And what I fear for
Mm-hmm.
people, and this is why I push back on sometimes people that use the term bind, which I'm not against bind, but I think it's way overused. And now it's just become a bucket term for all things benzo withdrawal. And when you talk
Mm-hmm.
to these people and you try to give them some things that might help them, they'll say, well, I can't do that, I have bind. I go, what do you
Mm-hmm.
mean? Nothing, where I have a brain injury. It's a neurological dysfunction, and nothing works. And then you just have to wait and hope that it corrects itself. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's a slippery slope, because if it's not that, and even if it was, then we can argue about, is there, what can you do to help facilitate recovery with bind? But if it's not bind, then what do you're disarming yourself. Like,
Mm-hmm.
maybe it is something that you're not looking at. For example, I had a client recently, 6 years out, at the end of their rope, really talking about dark places. I never healed, I'm stuck in bind, all of this. I find out he's agoraphobic. He's been agoraphobic. I said, you know what agoraphobia is? It just means I'm afraid to leave the house. No, that's one part of the description. Agoraphobia is when your limbic system has come to fear every damn thing around you, that it can truly believes that the entire environment you're in is unsafe. And you have been now in a place where it's like, I go, it's like being like a soldier on the battlefield and bombs are blowing up all around you. And you just get to a place where you go, as long as I don't move from this little hole, I'm kind of safe. And so think
Mm-hmm.
about, your limbic system never is going to get fully healed, so to speak, or get back to that state that it was before agoraphobia if you don't push back. But then again, if
Mm-hmm.
you're not pushing back because you have yourself convinced that you just have a brain injury, then 6 years go by, right? So this person's sitting in this belief, finally reach out to me completely without options. A lot of people reach out to me like it's a last ditch effort. And then I say, look, you got agoraphobia. Let's just work on that. Well, I think I have a brain injury. Maybe who can tell? Who can say either way? But let's just work on the agoraphobia. And then within 3 or 4 months, massive changes started happening. Windows again, and a year and a half later, the guy would tell you 98% better. You know, the 2% he doesn't even know if it's benzo, what the hell it is. So I guess my long-winded question is sort of, what are your thoughts on that? And when you look at yourself now, how healed you are, how do you differentiate, or have you differentiated what I think is, this is what was left from benzos, this is what I had before, versus no,
Mm-hmm.
this is just some real neurological stuff going on from this damn drug?
Right. Yeah. And I've talked to a lot of people about this recently too, because it's one of the really, really difficult things that you brought up. Is it bind? Is it, stuff from my past? Is it trauma? Is it, other underlying mental health issues? Is that when you come into benzo damage or benzo withdrawal, protracted withdrawal, whatever you want to call it, you're dealing with that and potentially other mental health issues at the same time, simultaneously. For me, it's taken time to weed out, what's what.
Right.
Once I knew that I was healing from the benzo injury, then I could start to see that, okay, like I do still have depression.
Right.
I'm not bipolar. That was definitely a misdiagnosis based on probably my drug usage at the time. So no
Sure.
fault on the psychologist who diagnosed me with that. But I do swing more towards the depressive side,
Right.
and I could see that as I was healing, that was definitely the case, because when I first came off of benzos, my nervous system was so revved up, so high, I was just almost always, just hyper vigilant,
Right.
and anxious all the time. There was no room for depression. Once
Right.
I started healing, I started to come down into those valleys, and I'm like, okay, that's still there. So there is something that I've had since childhood that I can remember from being, 5, 6 years old, feeling depression, feeling what
Right.
is this like overwhelming sadness as a
Right.
kid that I don't know how to describe. That was still there. So it's had to be dealt with, in a healthy way in its own time.
Sure.
When I started to experience that this was still something that I have. Um, so like I would advocate for anybody who, is thinks that they might still have underlying issues. Yeah, don't, throw all your eggs in one basket and say, well, this is all the benzo damage. This is all neurological damage. Yes, absolutely. A lot of it
Right.
probably is, could be. Um, but I would advocate for anybody and suggest to anybody to get, outside help outside of the benzo community, which, there's a lot of help here with the coaches, with all the information, it's awesome. Um, if I've needed outside work, I've read a ton of books. I've had therapy. I still get therapy. I still try to tackle this from all angles. It's a
Right.
holistic approach for me. It's multifaceted. I don't want to ever just say this is because of this, because I know that I had issues before taking I would have never started a benzodiazepine if there wasn't something initially that I was trying to treat, whether it's
Right.
anxiety or insomnia or whatever it is. So I hope that kind of answers
Right.
that
Yeah.
question that you asked about. Yeah, because that's a good point.
Yeah, yeah. And again, there's a lot of misconceptions for people on the outside is, and I've heard some for you too. Believe me, I've heard good and I wouldn't
I
say
believe it.
bad, but criticisms of things, which is why I wanted to talk to you, and get in and hear from you, because people just, they'll watch 5 seconds of a video, they'll read a headline, they'll hear someone who also didn't watch your video but heard something you said on Reddit, and before you know it, there's just sort of like this gossip thing going on, permeating of like, you know what Dan does, and it may not be completely true at all. You're like, what?
Mm-hmm.
How the hell did you get that notion? And so one thing that I've heard is people say, Coach Powers doesn't think that if you're a year off benzos, you can be damaged. And I go, no, you're not listening to me. What I'm saying is, for one, you do have a pre-existing condition, and it does not go away. I read a blog by Dr. Jen, my arch nemesis on Benzoland, which I do like her, but we have a strained relationship. But she had put a blog up on saying that when she came off benzos, even her pre-existing condition went away. And I thought, that does not happen. I would love to get her on a podcast and ask her, what the hell are you talking about? Can you expand on that? Did you misspeak? That doesn't go away. If you have anxiety, depression, it will not go away. And if it did, then it almost makes benzo look pretty cool, that you can somehow come off this horrible thing and end up better than you were before. But without, I
Mm-hmm.
said, no, I believe her that her anxiety and whatever she was battling is no longer in the picture. But then I would think, Jen, you're probably downplaying all the hard work and self improvement you've done over these last 10 years to get where you are. And to just suggest that it maybe went away seems like it's like it actually robs you of all the effort and work and things. But I've heard that from multiple people that, like, oh, when you come off, it's just going to go away. No, 99.9% of the time, it is not going to go away unless you healed from whatever it was somehow in the process, which very well
Mm-hmm.
could be the case, or you healed from all your self work to get off of benzos, and that had a trickle down effect and help. That could happen. But
Mm-hmm.
then there's also the things that happen again that manifest during that acute period. And more times than not, that's the stuff that I battle with my clients is, I didn't have health anxiety before this. I didn't have insomnia. I didn't have major depression. I didn't have agoraphobia. And now it's 2, 3 years out. Why the hell do I still have these things? Why are they not going away? Right? Like that to me is a huge piece of it. But even then I look at all those things and I say, it all came from benzos, guys. Right? So if you're having that, I'm not saying that 2 years out benzos caused it. Benzos put all of those things in your life, and the trauma that you went through coming off of benzos, and the receptor damage, and all of it goes into the mix. So if anything, I think my argument is I'm building the damage up. I'm not reducing it. I'm saying it's a lot more complex, and it's a multi-headed dragon. It's a
Mm-hmm.
7 to 12-headed beast that we're fighting. And to
Mm-hmm.
just call it, use an umbrella term like benzo, it's like you're almost just doing yourself a disservice. You know what I mean? So
Mm-hmm.
I do think what's important is treating the symptoms, because we don't know how to treat benzo. What is benzo withdrawal? I mean, what
Right.
is it? Right? When you really get to the nitty and gritty, and there's all
We
these
don't know.
talks, and
Right.
there's all these talks. It's a GABA A receptor, and if you do this, and I just had this on the other day. Somebody had brought up something like that, like an absolute of what it does, and I said, listen, then if it's all that what you're saying it is, then how come? What about the guy that comes off after 25 years, cold turkeyed, real fast, and then 6 months later he's doing great?
Mm-hmm.
If it's all receptor damage, what about his receptors? Why did he bounce back? And why did the person that was on it for 2 months spend 2 years coming off of it, and their
Right.
life is hell 5 years later? So I don't think it's as simple, to just say it's this or that. I think it's a hell of a lot of things that are going on there. Like I said, it's a seven-headed beast. But
Absolutely. Yeah.
that's certainly been my criticism from people that don't think has spent enough time to say Coach Powers thinks it's that if you're 2 years off or a year out, it's all pre-existing or post, and I think they feel gaslit by it. And I understand that. I'm very sympathetic and empathetic, because I was gaslit very much as well. But it's like, guys, you still have to get truth. You still have to share information. And the reality is, if you had a pre-existing condition coming off benzos, chances are it's going to be a little bit worse for a period of time. And
Mm-hmm.
the chances are, on top of benzo damage and receptor, which I do think is a big part of all this, of course, um, there are things left in the wake of benzo, so to speak, right? So insomnia, depression, whatever it is. And again, I just think you have to treat the symptoms. And if you treat the symptoms, if you just take a holistic, all overarching mental health approach to your recovery, you'll see things will fall in alignment. We don't know how long or what it will
Yeah.
look like, but I promise you that it will all fall in alignment. When I see
Mm-hmm.
people go the other way, is the people that gave up,
Mm-hmm.
and that breaks my heart. And I've lost people to that, and it breaks your heart because they don't know
Mm-hmm.
how damn close they are,
Right.
to healing. And I look at my own life, and God, I was so close to tapping out. I was so close
Mm-hmm.
at moments to tapping out, and then just 60 days later, 30 days later, this window that things
Yep.
turn a corner, and you don't
Yep.
know how close it is. Like the
Mm-hmm.
experiment with the rats swimming. It's like you don't know how close you are to getting out of that water. So just keep swimming, and don't give up,
Mm-hmm.
and keep. And then again, like I say, take a real overarching, all-encompassing approach to your recovery, and don't sweep it under one umbrella and convince yourself that you can't do anything and you're disabled and your situation is different. Right? How many times have you heard that?
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Right.
sure every client,
Everybody
Dan,
thinks they're the most damaged. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
get ready,
Mm-hmm.
Dan. You've never heard a case like mine. And you go, okay.
You're right.
And yes, I have a
Yep.
thousand times, but
Mm-hmm.
people heal like me. Yes, people heal like you too, you
Mm-hmm.
know.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the kind of my overarching message on that. So I'm glad we got a chance to um, touch on this, and I hope you don't mind. I don't come off like patronizing or anything like that. I'm talking to you, but I'm also being mindful that I have an audience that may not know these things. So I don't mean to sound
Of course. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
okay.
no, I appreciate you bringing it up. I think it's important to talk about, and you raised some really important points about it for sure. Yeah,
Well,
I think it's very good to be mindful of, and I agree. I think it's a holistic, multi-headed, multifaceted thing that we go through. It's not simple by any means, and I think that we're still in the dark ages of it.
yeah,
We
we are.
still so much we don't know about it. I mean,
Yeah,
people like you've been at the forefront of it for quite a while now, and me, I've just come along, here recently. But even so, I mean, like I said,
yeah,
I think at the beginning of when we started talking, you were one of the first people out there that I found talking
right.
about this publicly. And here we are, this is 8 years later, and we really, haven't made a whole lot of progress. Not you, but
Yeah,
I mean, as as an understanding of what exactly this damage is. What is the injury? What
Right.
does it do? We still really don't know that much. We're still trying to figure it out as we go along.
Yeah. I will say attitudes are changing, you know. There's a lot more, I was like the black sheep of the Benzo community when I came on board because I was suggesting that we could do more and we should push back and we should do these things and I totally understood where everybody was coming from because if you don't have the right techniques and the practice and just the right approach to it all. And even then, like I said, what I was like guaranteeing you 15%, so I can understand from the
Mm-hmm.
outside going, that doesn't work and it makes me feel worse. And shut up. I'm gonna lay in bed and I'm gonna sit on a support group until this is over. And I get that
Mm-hmm.
mentality. I get it. I did the same damn thing. But you have to agitate to alleviate. You got things that will always get worse before they get better. And so
Mm-hmm.
we cannot look for the path of least resistance. That's what does us in. You can't
Mm-hmm.
avoid, you can't isolate, and you can't search for that path of least resistance because I always say it's like trading, an ounce of relief now for 10 pounds of suffering later. That's the exchange rate. So if you want to lay in bed and not push back or not, then that's just know that you're risking something down the road, and that,
Mm-hmm.
and if you can be okay with it, um, that you're going to work a little bit harder now, that there'll be some good things coming down the road. I think that's super important.
Mm-hmm.
Again, within context of what we've been talking about, because I don't want anybody to hear this and get inspired and go, I'm going to go to Disneyland tomorrow. Don't go to Disneyland tomorrow.
No, don't. Yeah, I know
Don't
you
do
heard me
that.
say that, but don't do that.
Start with like hot bath for
Yeah.
the next month. That's a starting place.
Right.
That's cool.
Right.
If you've been in
Right.
bed for 6 months, start with adding 50 steps to your day.
Right.
Try to
And
walk
let me
around
just
with
say
one.
for the record that I did overdo it going to Disney World. So
Yeah,
please don't go on Reddit groups and say that Dan said to go to Disney World. My point was it
yeah,
was too much. It was
yeah.
too much.
It's funny that you do have to put these disclaimers out because somebody would have cut off and go, Dan's trying to tell us to go. These two asses trying to tell us to go to
Yeah.
Disney World. No, no, we
That's their
didn't.
method of recovery. That's what they're trying to
Yeah,
say.
Dan's method. It's going to be in a Reddit. Watch Dan.
Mhm.
Watch out for Dan. This guy tries to tell
The
you to
Disney
heal.
method.
Yeah, the Disney method. That's it.
Yeah.
That's funny, man. Well, man, it's been great talking with you. I feel like you're a very easy guy to talk to, and I feel like I could go on forever, but we'll go ahead and end this because it's getting late and I'm very, very hungry.
Yeah.
But it's been awesome. And so before we go, tell the audience like how can they learn more about you, your website, the things you're offering, and kind of give them some reference for all that.
Yeah, so my handle is philosophical fishing. I started that because I was talking about fishing and a bunch of other stuff, but it's just stuck. So now I'm stuck with the name philosophical fishing, but it can have a different context. Anyway, www.philosophicalfishing.com is my website. If you look up philosophical fishing on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, you'll find me. I offer coaching sessions, coaching packages. Um, yeah, also find me on Whit Doring's website as well.
Right.
Those are all the places you can track me down right now.
Yeah. And so you do regular videos, kind of weekly, monthly kind of thing right now?
I was doing them more about once a week, and I've had to pull back a little bit because I just took a full-time job, but the videos will keep coming. So yeah, every couple of weeks at least I'll have a video out. And my Instagram, I'm usually posting stuff every single day. TikTok about once or twice a week, but I think going throughout November, December this year, and then into next year, I'm going to start doing a lot more videos too alongside the coaching.
Very cool. Awesome.
Yeah,
You got a lot going on there, man. Well, thank you so
you
much
betcha.
for coming on and talking and sharing your story and being open and then clarifying for others not to go to Disneyland. And
Exactly. If
we
you leave with us with nothing else, don't go to Disney World today, okay?
right, we set the stage here. Well, awesome, my friend. Well, thank you everybody for listening. Be sure to follow Dan, give us a like and leave a comment if you have thoughts or anything about this interview. And we will see you next time.